sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Friday, guys. I'm here early today. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And I believe my special guest is here. Scott, whenever you're ready, if you give me a thumbs up, I'll bring you in. All right. My special guest today is Scott Ritter. He is a former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer and an author. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
So, Scott, last time you were here, I feel like every time you're here, in between that time, there are a lot of things that happen in reference to foreign policy. So a lot has happened since you were here last time. I guess I want to start with Ukraine. So recently, the Senate just passed the $95 billion bill for foreign aid, which includes Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. In reference to Ukraine, the big question I think a lot of people have is, why, again, are we giving more money to Ukraine when it's very clear to those of us that have been paying attention that this war with Ukraine is already over, that obviously that Ukraine is not going to beat Russia, but here we are giving them more money. I want to get your take on that. Why are we still giving Ukraine money when we know for a fact that they cannot win this battle against Russia?
Well, the fact of the matter is, we never expected Ukraine to win this battle against Russia. Anybody who thought Ukraine could win this war should probably be drug tested. Although I understand that in many parts of the United States, it's legal to consume drugs. But you shouldn't make foreign policy decisions while under the influence of drugs. But it's never been the objective of the United States for Ukraine to beat Russia. In fact, if at the beginning of this conflict, the CIA briefed the president, 3-day war. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff anticipated the war to be over in a week. Nobody expected that Ukraine was going to outlast Russia. It wasn't until people misconstrued the Russian objectives in this. Russia called it a special military operation. And of course, we in the West, because we're overly politicized, says, no, it's an invasion. No, if it had been an invasion, it would have been over in 3 days or a week. It was a special military operation because Russia didn't want to defeat Ukraine. What Russia wanted was to get Ukraine to do that which the West wouldn't allow it to do, which is to say, we're going to be neutral. We're not going to join NATO. Crimea is cool, and we're not going to persecute the Russians of the Donbass. How do we know that? Because that's exactly what Russia did. Russia went in there in less than a week. Once they moved down to Kiev, once they took over large portions of Ukraine, Russia said, hey, let's go to the negotiating table. And the Ukrainian government looked around and said, yeah, we really don't have a choice at this point in time. So they went 6 rounds, finished up with something called the Istanbul Communique, which was this peace agreement. And I mean, in respect, at first, if you had told me about this without at the time, you said, this is what the Russians agreed to. I said, well, Russia must have lost the war because they gave everything to Ukraine. They just said, you can't be a member of NATO. Then they also said, Crimea is ours. But they said on the Donbass, it's not going to be yours, but there's going to be a referendum. We can't give the Donbass back to you because of the way you've abused the Russian people. But you change your constitution, you get everything back. Not only that, out of good faith, we're going to voluntarily withdraw our army from Kiev, from Chernihiv, from Sumy. We reduced our forces in Kharkiv by 50%. We're serious about this. We want peace. Oh, even though we said you can't join NATO, and this is the one that killed me, Article 5 protection will allow you to sign security guarantees with all of NATO. They give you Article 5 protection for everything but Crimea and the Donbass. Meaning that if we come in and we attack you here, it's like you're a member of NATO. They get to come in and protect you by law, by treaty. And I'm just going, that's insane. Why would Russia ever do that? Because Russia didn't want a war. Russia did everything possible to stop this war. But once it became clear, when Russia pulled back and did this, the West misconstrued this as a sign of weakness. And that's when they told the Ukrainians, don't accept the peace deal. We're going to give you $48 billion. Remember the Lend-Lease back in May of 2022? We're going to pump you full of weapons, and you guys can go and fight the Russians. But it was never, ever. And we know this because Lloyd Austin flew to Ukraine and went to Poland and said, all we want to do is hurt the Russians. What our strategic objective here is the strategic defeat of Russia, not to kick them out of Ukraine and all that, but to inflict so much harm on them that their military becomes demoralized, the people become demoralized, and they overthrow Vladimir Putin, because we were sanctioning them at the same time, trying to collapse their economy. So we were looking for Russia to collapse from within, not by the Ukrainians to beat them. Well, we misconstrued everything. We got it all wrong. Russian economy didn't collapse. The Russian army stood firm once they realized they'd been betrayed by the Ukrainians. They mobilized their defense industry. I just ran through some numbers today earlier in a conference I had. I'll just quick throw them out to your people so you understand what's going on here. Russia, when they started this conflict in 2022, had 900,000 men in their military. Russia today has 2.1 million men in their military. So for all the people that said Russia's weaker, Russia's this, Russia's that, Russia's 2.1 million. Now, 600,000 though are unique only to the special military operation, reservists, etc. But fully 1.5 million is a new expanded army because of the way the West has behaved. Russia today is producing about 150 tanks. That number might be up closer to 200, and it's capable of going to 300 tanks a month. 300 tanks a month. The United States can produce 33 tanks a month. Wait a minute. The United States is the greatest military power in the world. And we don't even produce 33 tanks. We refurbish 33 tanks. The Germans can do 150 tanks a year. The French can do about 50 tanks a year. The British can do about 50 tanks a year. Basically, in 2 months, Russia outproduces all of NATO in tanks. Artillery shells. We can produce around 3 million a year. The Russians can produce around 24 million a year. Yes, they outproduce us all along the line. The United States Army, 425,000 strong. In 2022, we were saying that in order to keep this strength of 425, we needed to recruit 60,000 people. They could only recruit 45,000. So in 2023, they upped it to 65,000. They only recruited 50,000. Because they didn't have the manpower, they had to shrink the army by 24,000. So the U.S. Army shrank by 24,000, while the Russian army grew by 600, 2.19, 1.2 million. So anybody who thinks the Russians are weak and all this stuff, no, Russia has turned this thing around. Russia is in the driver's seat. Ukraine today has run out of manpower. This money we gave them, it's useless. Even Jake Sullivan said, we can give them all the weapons in the world, but if they don't have men to use them, it's no good. The Ukrainians have no men left. They did an emergency mobilization order. There's nobody. Everybody's running away. Nobody wants to fight. So while Ukraine, everybody's running away from the fight, Russia is getting 40,000 volunteers a month. Now let's talk about these volunteers. These aren't just young, stupid kids, because in America, after we do the USA thing, the vast majority of people that join are frat boys out of college and kids that, don't have a job, but they're sitting around and they're feeling a little, rough and tough, and so they join the military. The guys that join the Russian military are men in their 30s and men in their 40s. They all are well employed. They have families. So why would you leave a good paying job in a factory, a family, a house, a mortgage, kids, when you don't have to? Remember, they're volunteers. They're not being drafted. Do you want to know why? Because they are patriotic. Because all of Russia has woken up to the fact that the West is at war against Russia in Ukraine, and that this is their great patriotic war. Have you ever seen that movie Patton? When George C. Scott's character, what are you going to tell your kids? Where was Grandpa in the Great War? Shoveling poop in Louisiana. Well, you don't want to tell. So the Russians don't want to say, where were you in the Great War? They don't want to say, well, I was, doing information technology, or I was, doing this or that. They all want to say, hey, campaign medal. I was there. I was at the front. I was fighting for Russia. 40-year-old men who have medically disqualified, meaning that they've gone to the recruiter, and the recruiter said, no, you can't because you're medically disqualified. They're paying out of their own money to go get surgeries, to go get this fixed so they can go to the recruiter and say, here, I got it fixed. Please let me join. It is a disgrace. It is dishonorable in Russia not to be volunteering for this. And if you're not volunteering for the front, we have guys who are driving. The way the Russian thing works is, they get all the stuff they need but the war is changing. Right now, there's a lot of drones flying around. And a lot of these drones, aren't military grade drones because they just sort of grew from the grassroots. And so they're calling home saying, get us more drones. So communities are going and buying drones from China. They're getting like 10,000 of them. Then they stuff them into armored cars and they get volunteers to drive them to the front lines. So guys are at home and they're saying, let's take the drones to the boys in the front. They're driving there. Every once in a while, bam, they get hit and die. So this is dangerous. All of Russia is mobilized. All of Russia is mobilized. Ukraine can't win this war. We gave the money away because we want them to kill to kill Russians. That's all this is about. And again, I just asked you, if you recall, in the summer of 2021, before the great American retreat from Afghanistan, there was a huge scandal. The Russians, it appeared, had bribed the Taliban to kill Americans. If you remember that, it never happened. It was total garbage. But all over New York Times, and they're so mad. And when you break the story down, it came down to one report of a Taliban bomb outside of Bagram Air Base where 3 Americans died. And they said, we believe that these guys who did this got money, and they had this convoluted money trail of the Russians to kill these 3 Americans, and we want to go to war against Russia. You're not allowed to kill Americans. America just gave Ukraine $60 billion to kill as many Russians as they can. Now put yourself in the shoes of a Russian family. What do you think about America right about now? America started this war. America turned Ukraine against Russia. America has killed over 500,000 Ukrainians because we started this war. We're responsible for the deaths of nearly 100,000 Russians because we started this war. And now we just gave them $60 billion more to kill more Russians. And so now Scott Ritter, like the idiot he is, because I believe in peace, I'm going to go to Russia in June. I am going to Russia in June. And I'm going to travel around Russia, and I'm going to meet Russian families. And when I sit down with them, how are they going to look at me? I mean, how am I going to be able to sit down at the table with these people as an American, and they're going to go, hey, welcome to Russia, but isn't your government trying to kill our people? And what am I supposed to answer that? Oh, well, it's not me. I'm not. Well, aren't you an American citizen? Well, oh, yes, I'm very proud. Aren't you? Isn't America a democracy, representative democracy? Well, absolutely. So isn't the government held accountable to you for what they do in your name? Yes, I believe in that. So the government's killing Russians. What are you doing about it? Now, the answer is I'm here in Russia trying to make peace. But the point is, what an uncomfortable place to be. To be sitting across from Russians saying, yep, my government just gave those Nazis $60 billion to kill your husband, your father, your son. But the point is, Russia isn't going to lose this war. Ukraine isn't going to win this war. But we just keep throwing money away. 60 billion there, 20 some odd billion to the Israelis, a couple billion to Taiwan. And think of what it's about. 60.1 or 61 billion to the Ukrainians to kill Russians, 23 billion to the Israelis to commit genocide against the Palestinians, and a couple billion to the Taiwanese so they can commit suicide like the Ukrainians did and be part of a war. What does America do right? I would not be so angry. I still would be angry about the money because good Lord, just right down the road, we got crumbling infrastructure. I got homeless. We got a ghetto. We got everything, man. It could benefit from some money from the federal government to help the American people. I think the people in Flint, Michigan still have dirty water. I'm pretty sure all around the country we can point to problems that have been there for decades that could use an infusion of this capital. But I also understand that we need to promote goodwill around the world. We're supposed to be a world leader. So if we were giving the Ukrainians $60 billion to build schools, build infrastructure, do everything we're supposed to be doing here at home, at least I'd be saying, well, at least it's going to something good. So if I ever visited Ukraine, at least I could walk around with my head held high saying, hey, how'd that taxpayer money go? How you guys doing with America's money? Things are looking good? Yay, you love America because we're here to help you. We give you all the money that we need at home. If we went to the Israelis who were promoting Israeli-Palestinian rapprochement, joint education centers where the Palestinians grew up with the Israelis, where the walls came down, where communities came together, I'd go to Israel and Palestine and say, hey, how'd that money help out? You guys aren't killing each other anymore, right? Peace is breaking out all over. I'm feeling a little bit better. Yes, my bridges are still collapsing in Albany. They're still homeless and there's problems, but at least we did something good. The same thing with Taiwan. Hey, did we help you diversify your economy more so you guys who are already the richest economy in the world? Wait a minute. The richest economy in the world who have a surplus of money and we gave them money. Never mind. Taiwan, I'll never be happy about giving you money under any circumstance because you should be giving us money. But, we're the bankrupt nation, trillions in debt. You're the guys making all sorts of money. You make all those computer chips that make our phones and everything work. Roll some of that to us. We want a grant from Taiwan to America to make us feel better. But my point is, we're doing it to start war. All we do is have a policy based upon starting war and coercion. Right now, Blinken's in China. I'm all over the map here, but it's all related. Blinken's in China. Instead of sitting down with the Chinese and saying, hey, let's do diplomacy. Why don't we talk about this? Let's see what we can do. What do you think, guys? We can avoid. We come in. If you don't do it the way we want to do it, we're going to sanction your financial institutions. And the Chinese are like, Tony, see the hand? It ain't shaking. You threatened that with the Russians, right? How'd that go, Tony? Europe's economy has just collapsed because you sanctioned the Russians. What do you think is going to happen if you sanction China? Oh, the American economy is going to collapse in an election year, you idiot. But that's the whole point. All we know how to do is threaten people. So this 60, and here's the other sickening thing about this money. I think 48 billion of it rolls back to America. It doesn't go to Ukraine. It goes to American defense industry. And see, this was the selling point. And this is why I don't understand Americans didn't get it. Because everybody in since said, look, this is good for the American economy. You see, 48 billion is going to come back and it's going to mean jobs, American jobs. And we're going to build weapons for America. And there's no. So you're going to extend the war in Ukraine that's already cost them 500,000 dead. You're willing to sacrifice another 100, 150, 200,000 Ukrainians for American jobs. How do you feel about that, America? Now that I told you what it's really about. All those jobs you're going to get, all that money, that Christmas bonus, it's going to be because 200,000 Ukrainian families had to put a loved one in the ground.
Yep.
Put that in your Christmas, coffee and drink it. America sucks as a country right now. And I have to tell you, the American people suck because we're letting this happen. I mean, I know there's people out there demonstrating, but not about Ukraine. There's no demonstrations about Ukraine. There are a handful of people, you and I are going to talk about it, but the American people who say we believe in things, we believe in doing the right thing, we believe in freedom. You don't believe in anything except getting rich. You don't believe in anything except getting a bigger payday. You don't believe in anything except accumulating comfort. You want the U.S. government to wrap you in a cocoon of comfort, inject you with the feel-good sauce, and you're just going to sit there and rock around and feel good. And as long as they keep doing it, it doesn't matter how they justify it. Money to Ukraine, money to Israel, money to Taiwan. You don't care. You don't. We don't care. But unfortunately, the rest of the world does. And there will come a day when America is going to find it difficult to get a seat at the table. It's like we're going to show up at the table and no one's going to get up and offer us a seat. No one's going to even turn to look at us. They're just all going to turn their back to us and ignore us, as we deserve to be ignored, because all we stand for is death and destruction. We don't stand for anything good anymore. None of the principles and values that ostensibly define us as a nation. We don't stand for any of that.
That's a really good point. meet you for just a second. That's a really good point, Scott. And I just want to ask you this question. I know you said you're going to go visit Russia in June. Are you concerned that you may be detained when you try to come back to the United States? And I'm asking just because I know that's happened to Fiorella, and I know Tara Reid is in a very troubling position right now. She is kind of stuck in Russia, went there for a book tour, and then was told by Representative Matt Gaetz that if she were to return to the United States, that she would probably be detained. Are you concerned about that, or are you just kind of like, whatever, fuck them?
Well, I mean, I have a family and I have responsibilities. So the last thing I want to do is end up being detained. And this will be my third trip in a year. I went last May for a month. When I came back, I was stopped for a number of hours and questioned extensively before they returned my passport, shook my hand and told me, welcome to America. I went again in December and January for a lengthy tour that took me through some controversial areas like the Donbass and Crimea. I gave a speech before 25,000 Chechen soldiers that got a lot of attention. So I thought for sure I was going to get some special treatment. They made me sit down for an hour, handed me my passport, shook my hand, said, welcome to America, welcome home, and sent me on my way. This trip, there's nothing controversial about it, which probably means they're going to shoot me upon arrival. But there's nothing controversial about this trip. I'm literally going, we're going to go to 16 different cities throughout. The motto of this trip is from the Pacific Ocean to the Baltic Sea and everything in between. And we are going to places that most Americans won't have heard of. And that's why we're going to expose Americans to this. We're going to meet with Russians, have town hall meetings. We're going to introduce Americans. We're reaching out to peace activists across the country to get a list of people who would like to have Russian pen pals. In each city, we're going to find Russian families, and we're going to match them up with an American family. We're going to have a satellite hook up there and let the first call be on us, put them together, let them talk, and then we're going to try and create this connectivity that needs to be happening so that people stop fearing Russia and Russians stop fearing America. There's nothing, no one could say, well, you're doing something that's against America. Really? Making friends is against America? I thought that's what we were supposed to be about. No, this trip is it's the purest kind of trip imaginable, truly designed to be people's diplomacy. We're not trying to change American policy. We don't care. I mean, we do care, but we're not there to, policy discussions. We're there to, hey, take Ivan, meet Frank. Frank, what's your wife's name? Melissa. Meet Svetlana. You got kids. Here's little Yvonne and there's little Frankie, and they're going to talk and say hi. And then at the end, after 10 minutes, we're going to go, okay, you each got the contact information. Shaka, brother, let's go. And we're going to move on to the next city, and we're going to do the same thing all over again. The idea is to break down the barriers of ignorance and fear by getting people to talk to one another. If the U.S. government wants to pull me aside and detain me for this, God bless them. I'm game. But I don't think they're going to, because I'm not, I can't speak. I don't know anything about what Tara, her situation. I trust all these people when they got pulled over that they felt afraid, and maybe they had cause to feel afraid. I don't. I'm not afraid, because in my heart of hearts, I know that there's literally no controversy here. I mean, if the U.S. government wants to make a big deal out of free speech and trying to improve people-to-people relations, that's on them, not on me. I'm not going over there trying to cut a secret deal or, open up a secret business or anything like that. I'm simply trying to make peace break out all over. I hope it succeeds, and I hope I don't get detained. But if I do, hey, to the Customs and Border Patrol guy that's listening to this right now, writing down notes saying detain Ritter, at least, could you guys have a Diet Coke there for me? Because if you're going to hold me for a couple hours, I do get thirsty, and you're going to, I'll talk, my throat will get sore, but, come on, scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But, no, I'm not worried about it.
Okay, cool. I was just checking. But I want to talk about this really quick too, as well. Zelensky was recently on Meet the Press, like right after this aid was announced. And I'm starting to notice now, even mainstream media is starting to question him a little bit more harshly about what is the plan here. So I want to play his response here, where he gets a little bit of pushback from Meet the Press.
All the others.
President Zelensky, can you give Americans a sense of the timeline? Will you still need as much aid this time next year? Or do you think you can turn the corner on Russia? What's the timeline?
Well, it depends on when we actually get weapons on the ground, as you said it, Christian. If we get it in half a year, well, we've had the process stalled for half a year, and we had losses in several directions. The losses in men, in equipment. In the East, it was very difficult. And we did lose the initiative there. Now, we have all the chance to stabilize the situation and to overtake the initiative. And that's why we need to actually have the weapon systems. When we get it, when we have it in our arms, then we do have the chance to take this initiative and to move ahead and to protect Ukraine. But giving you a specific timeline of the war, well, it depends on how soon we get this aid. There are so many variables, so many factors, and sometimes when we protect the important line, you retreat because you don't have enough forces and equipment, and then retaking that line would take 2 or 3 times more. I'm not saying that this is how it's going to end up, but things are possible, and I can give you an example with F-16.
And we'll go ahead and stop there. But I wanted you to hear that part there because it's very obvious that he was not giving her a definite answer. He doesn't really have a timeline because he knows that he cannot win this war. Even other people that are around Zelensky, it was reported last year that he is delusional. This is what people around him are saying. He's delusional and he knows there's no way. We've already lost this. What do you think is going to happen going forward? Do you see Zelensky actually sticking around and being a part of this for the next year? Or do you have a feeling that at some point Zelensky is going to take off? He's just going to run away and leave Ukraine, and Ukraine is just going to be left, to fight on its own accord?
Zelensky made a decision not to hold presidential elections or parliamentarian elections, which were supposed to take place this year. He claims that the Constitution allows him to stop elections because of a time of war. That's a interesting interpretation of the Ukrainian Constitution and an interesting interpretation of principles of democracy. For people, without getting into the nuances of the Ukrainian Constitution, Abraham Lincoln held elections in the middle of the Civil War against General McClellan. Very contested elections. Franklin Delano Roosevelt held an election in 1944, winning an unprecedented 4th term, sworn in 1945. Democracies hold elections. Winston Churchill lost an election at the end of the Second World War while he was in Potsdam negotiating with Stalin and Roosevelt about how to bring into the war. The Brits held an election. So the concept that you can't have an election in wartime is stupid. On May 20th, his term expires. And it'll be interesting to see how Ukraine treats him and how the world treats him. Russia's already said that he won't, in their eyes, he won't be the president of Ukraine. That raises another question. If he's no longer a head of state, can Russia kill him? Because Russia's pretty much said, we're not going to kill a head of state. But if he's no longer a head of state, can they kill him? I don't know. I would hope they wouldn't. I don't think we need to be in the business of knocking off political leaders. But, it doesn't matter what he thinks. I read an interesting article the other day where they said Ukraine will be able to resume the counteroffensive, the one that they did last year where everybody died. They'll be able to resume that counteroffensive by 2026. I'm like, if you think there's going to be Ukraine in 2026, you got problems. The Russians are confident that there will be major changes to the military map by May, June. They envision a collapse of the Ukraine. It's happening today. I mean, I opened up all my Telegram accounts today and went through them, and everywhere I looked, the Russians were advancing here, advancing there, took another city here, took another village there. There's no place on the battlefield where the Russians were retreating. the Russians are advancing. They destroyed another Ukrainian brigade that the Ukrainians can't replace. That's one thing Zelensky didn't talk about. All this equipment he gave them, where are the men? You don't have any men left. And the other Russians, in addition to saying the battlefield will dramatically change, they believe that the politics of this war dramatically changes by the end of summer, early fall. And when you say the politics, that this war is over, that basically Ukraine will have to agree to unconditional surrender, and that the Russians, as part of the terms of the stopping this, will denazify. That means get rid of the Zelensky regime, send him to his mansion in Miami, and also demilitarize. There will be no more Ukrainian army. There will be a Ukrainian government that the Russians approve of, and that's that. Now, will this money that they just received delay this a little bit? It could. I mean, it doesn't matter how you put it. With $13.8 billion, is $13.8 billion. That's a lot of money. It can buy a lot of stuff. It can create a lot of hate and destruction. But it's not enough to turn the tide of this war. The Russians have superiority or supremacy across the battlefield, and the tragedy is that the Ukrainians are dying at a rate that approximates about 1,000 guys a day. In Vietnam, the war that broke America's back, at the height of the Vietnamese War, we were losing 200 guys a week, and that broke our back. 200 body bags coming home in a week, and it killed us. Ukrainians are burying 1,000 guys a day. Again, I asked the Americans who gave the money over there, why? Because all you did is guarantee more dead Ukrainians. The Russians right now have the lowest casualty rate than at any time in the war. All those people out there saying the whole purpose is to kill Russians, understand this. We don't kill that many Russians anymore. Oh, yes, Russians die. There's no doubt about it. Yes, there's videos out there that show the Russians dying, but they're not dying 1,000 a day. The Russians might be losing 30 to 50 a day. Still a lot, because 30. Let's say it's 50 a day. 7 days. That's 350 body bags a week. That's 150 more than the 200 that broke the back of America in Vietnam. So the Russian people are burying 350 of their boys a week. That's a lot over time. But their spirit is unmatched. Their spirit is unbroken. And the Ukrainians, on the other hand, they can't get anybody to join. They have to go out and kidnap people to join their military. So, it is what it is.
What a mess. I want to pivot into Israel and Iran. So I know the last time you met, or the last time you were on the show, tensions haven't escalated to the point that it is now. Now, Iran is involved. Obviously, we can start from the beginning where Israel attacked the Iranian embassy in Damascus. So obviously, Iran responded to that attack. And then now, Israel has responded to Iran. We are now basically seeing what could be a full-scale war in the Middle East. It's no longer just about Israel and Gaza. And this is something that I was afraid of. This is why a lot of us were calling for a ceasefire, not just in reference to what's happening to the Palestinian people in Gaza and in the West Bank, but also because we knew that this could escalate to another level here. What do you predict is going to happen going forward? Because a lot of us are aware that Iran does have powerful weapons. And we continue to hear the State Department and people like Antony Blinken say the same rhetoric over and over, that Israel has a right to defend itself. It's funny that Israel does, but nobody else does. Mm-hmm. You notice that? No one else does. But what do you think is going to happen here? Because I'm looking at it as though now there is conflict between Israel and Iran, not just Israel and Gaza. And then I'm thinking about all of the other neighboring countries, right? Because Israel has also attacked Syria and Lebanon. And then you have countries like Jordan and Egypt that are also in the mix here, but they don't seem to want to really get involved. What do you think is going to happen next? And what does this really mean for Israel in the long term, in the grand scheme of things?
Well, prior to this whole exchange, Israel enjoyed what I would call deterrence superiority. And what that means is Israel could do whatever it wanted to do and pay no consequence. It was backed up diplomatically by the United States, and it was backed up by the impression that the Israeli military would bring more harm to any nation attacking Israel than that nation would bring to Israel, tenfold. And so everybody's a little bit afraid. And Israel got away with literal murder. They assassinated Iranian scientists in Tehran. They blew up Iranian nuclear infrastructure inside Iran using covert means. They bombed Iranian positions in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, killing Iranian personnel. And Iran did nothing because the feeling, I think, in the Iranians were that if they responded, Israel would attack Iran and this would get them in a war that they didn't want. But then Israel attacked the consulate. And that was a bridge too far. That was a red line because the consulate, they didn't just kill some senior Iranians. They attacked Iranian soil. By law, by international law, that consulate is the soil of Iran. And the Iranians said, you can't do that. That's our red line. So they had to retaliate, and they did. And this is the scary part because that retaliation could have been, because in order to, if you're going to respond, what you're trying to do is reset deterrence theory. What you're trying to do in responding is put the Israelis on notice that if you ever repeat what you just did, the pain is going to be so great, you're going to regret it instantly. So you have to attack with enough force to make that point, but you don't want to overdo it so that the Israelis feel compelled to hit back with everything they have. Escalation management. The Iranians did this perfectly. First of all, they coordinated with the United States. And they told the United States, stay out of this. And the U.S. said, okay, we will stay out of it. If some of the reports are true, the United States gave Iran permission to attack Israel, saying you can attack as long as you don't attack civilians. The Iranians went, don't worry, we got you on this one. 72 hours notice the Iranians gave the United States and Israel that they were going to attack. That allowed Israel and the United States to build all their defenses up. And then they launched the attack in a very aggressive way, no secret, middle of the morning. When they launched it, they televised the drones going off. And these are very loud drones. So the Israelis had a further 5 to 6 hours waiting for the drones to come to get their defenses in order. And then they televised the launch of the cruise missiles. Then they announced the launch of the ballistic missiles. So the Iranians were doing everything to tell the Israelis, and here comes the next punch, except for the last punch. The last punch was 9 modern Iranian missiles. All 9 of these hit their target. None were shot down. And that was the point the Iranians were trying to make. They were saying, look, you got this defense here. It's all up and running. And we're letting you save face by shooting down drones and everything. But the 9 missiles that you can't shoot down, we sent them out. Yeah, we didn't kill people. We avoided civilians. We blew up a runway. We blew up empty warehouses and all that kind of stuff. But look where we hit. You know that's exactly where we wanted to hit. And had we adjusted it just a little bit, we could have taken out your command center. We could have taken out your F-35s. We could have taken out your ammunition, your fuel. But we chose not to. We chose to blow up empty buildings. But we penetrated the most heavily defended place on earth when it comes to anti-ballistic missiles. And that's the signal they sent to the Israelis. So now the Israelis are sitting there enraged because nobody's ever attacked them like that since 1991 when Saddam Hussein fired missiles in there. Enraged, and they've got to do something. But America, first of all, said, we're not going to war against Iran on this one. You're on your own. You blew up their consulate. This is on you. And then the Israelis went, but if we start a fight with the Iranians and the Americans aren't there, we may not win this fight. But we have to retaliate. We have to do something. And so it looks like they did a combination of 2 things. One, they had assets inside Iran that they've used in the past to assassinate scientists, blow up buildings, things of that nature. Release a handful of drones that flew towards an air base and a radar installation, and the Iranians shot these drones down. And that's what the Iranians announced, the drones. Then the Israelis brought in 2 aircraft that flew through Syria into Iraq, and they launched, I think, 2 to 4 Rampage missiles, which is a supersonic, hypersonic missile fired from the aircraft. And these flew in, and these hit 4 targets inside Iran. We don't know what the targets are. Apparently, they weren't that important. They may have been in the desert, just in a pattern. Who knows? But they sent a signal to the Iranians. You couldn't stop this. So we hit you with what we had. You couldn't stop it either. And what the Iranians did is they had said before, if Israel attacks, that immediately they're going to hit back with everything. But instead, the Iranians never talked about the 2 airplanes and the 4 missiles. They talked about the drones that came from inside. And then they said nothing happened. There was no defeat. So the Iranians immediately poo-pooed this story. And even the supreme leader, when he's given an interview, when they talked about hitting the Israelis, said, we're not here to talk about numbers of drones shot down and things like that. That's in the past. We don't want to talk about that anymore. I think both Israel and Iran have said we're not allowing this thing to go any further. We both made our points, and we dodged a bullet. We don't need this larger war, and we're going to stay focused on what we were doing. Israel is going to continue committing genocide in Gaza, and the Iranians are going to continue supporting the axis of resistance, Hamas, Hezbollah, the militias, the Houthi, and they're not going to let this thing spin out of control. So I think we dodged a big bullet, and I think we're actually in a safer place today than we were back when Israel attacked the consulate. Back then, there was a real possibility of, a retaliation turning into a general war. But because of the wisdom of the Iranians, and to some extent the ability of the Israelis to, for once in their life, do the right thing and not escalate, we avoided a major war that would have been devastating for everybody. So this is one of the few times where I feel actually halfway decent about the outcome.
Well, I just wanted to add something that you mentioned there about how Iran made strategic attacks. That just goes to show you that Israel also could have made strategic attacks, but they chose not to, right? So they chose to purposely. That's another thing that people, I think we got to point out, guys, when Israel says we're doing our best to target Hamas. Obviously, we know that's not true, but it just goes to show you Iran showed that example. And it also showed that if we wanted to get through the Iron Dome, we can.
Yes.
So I think that seems like.
Well, it is, but it's more than just the Iron Dome. I mean, understand that the Iron Dome is a U.S.-Israeli system, meaning the Israelis didn't build it. We built it. We paid for it. We designed it. We tested it. It has an Israeli name: Arrow 1, Arrow 2, Iron Dome, David Sling. They're all Israeli missiles, but it was our money, our joint work. But we also overlaid it, our ballistic missile defense system, the THAAD missile with our radars, the Aegis-capable ships with their radars, their ships. All of this was plugged in. This was an American ballistic missile shield over Israel, the same ballistic missile shield that we protect South Korea and Japan with, we protect Europe with. And the Iranians penetrated it, sent 9 missiles all the way through. And now the North Koreans are going, wait a minute, your hypersonics got through? We just tested a hypersonic. You mean our missiles are going to get through too? The Americans don't have a defense against us. And the Russians have been saying that all along, but now they know it. They're going, so our Kinzhal and Zircon missiles, you guys can't touch them. And Europe and NATO is going, we can't touch those missiles. The South Koreans and Japanese are going, we can't touch those missiles. The Taiwanese are saying, we can't touch the Chinese missiles. What the Iranians just did is invalidate over $100 billion worth of anti-ballistic missile defense expenditures, because they showed that whatever defenses are out there today, they can't stop a hypersonic missile.
It is very eye-opening, I think, for a lot of people. One of the things I wanted to bring up too is that obviously you're paying attention to what's happening across the United States right now. Multiple college students have decided to protest again in reference to the war in Gaza, but also like setting up the encampments. All the videos that I saw when this started, the students were being peaceful. There's students also here protesting at MIT and Northeastern. Again, these are peaceful assemblies here that are happening. And in some of these cities, the police have been sent in. In New York City, it was actually the president of Columbia University that made the call for the NYPD to come in. I think we all know how the NYPD can be. But then the worst display of this that I've seen so far has been in Texas. And Governor Abbott actually called in the state troopers, and it says state troopers deployed to smash hundreds of Palestine protesters in Texas right now as the student resistance spreads to UT Austin. I want to get your take on this. I'm going to play this like a 90-second vid, and I want you to look at this, Scott. The police showed up in riot gear. In riot gear. These kids are just for everyone to see. Now, Now, in my opinion, this is not necessary. These are kids. I mean, I know they're technically adults, but I still see them as kids. So this is ridiculous. This is over the top. There are also videos that I can't show in here because they're that violent, where I saw them attack journalists. I saw a trooper throw a journalist to the ground. And he had the camera in his hand. I saw professors being shoved to the ground and attacked. I also heard some of these officers repeating the same rhetoric that's coming from mainstream media, that they're all like Hitler, etc. This is really scary to me in reference to free speech and our First Amendment rights. But then also, what do you think this means for Israel? Because it was a couple months ago, there was an article that was released that Joe Biden was trying to basically warn Netanyahu that Israel is starting to lose support, not just from the young people, but just all across the world. And now we see like these college students, they are not willing to back down. And I'm very proud of them. And I think they, have the right idea here. But now it even shows you that even the police, who are often trained by the IDF in Israel, even the police, they're out here again fighting for Israel.
Yeah. No, first of all, like every American needs to go reacquaint themselves with what freedom of speech is and what freedom of assembly is, and understand the importance of student demonstrations as representing the moral compass of a nation. Civil rights, people demonstrating in favor of civil rights on campuses, anti-war in Vietnam, a war that today nobody can defend. And the students have every right to protest against genocide. They're not protesting against Jews. There's no violence against Jews. This is a manufactured argument. They're anti-Israel, and they are vocal. And if you're, I guess, a pro-Israeli Zionist, maybe you feel uncomfortable walking around a campus where people are calling out your cause. But there's been no violence. Nobody's beat up a Jew. Nobody's, done anything to Jewish people. This is an absurdity. In America, where we value free speech, let's say that we disagree, because trust me, there's some protests on campus, and I just go, no, that ain't my cause. That's not going to happen. But all I do on that one is I smile and I turn away and I walk away. I say, that's your thing. I'm over here doing my thing. God bless you. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. You go, you do your thing, but I'm not part of it and I'm not supporting it. That's the way we're supposed to be. I mean, so if I go in New York City and there's something happening in the streets of New York City that I'm uncomfortable with, leave. First of all, nobody's threatening me. I've never been accosted in New York City when there's events going on that I'm not supportive of. I don't accost them. I believe everybody has a right to be who they are. I believe everybody has a right to express how they feel about themselves. And I support that 100%. I would never, ever, ever once in my life say, shut that down. All I'm going to say is I don't want to be there. I'm uncomfortable. Okay. So respect that. And let me go off in my little, old fat white man space and just let me be who I am. But, but I would never try to shut that down, because America is about freedom of speech, about freedom of assembly. We used to let the KKK hold meetings, and it sickened me. But I was one of the people that said, we have to let them do it, because even though I hate their speech, even though I hate their cause, they have a right. I don't like it, but they have a right to speak. As long as they're not promoting violence and all that, they have a right to speak. And sometimes the best thing to do to destroy a cause is let them speak. Let them be who they are so people can see who they are. And I think that's a reason why the KKK is sort of like going away, hopefully. Because people have seen them for who they are. They say, I despise that. So if let's say I was pro-Israeli on this one, I'm not, but let's say I was. My strategy here would be to say, see who they are, listen to them, see what they're saying. And if I'm right, Americans should listen to that and go, yeah, we're not for that. We're not backing that. The problem with the Israelis is they're saying, listen to what they're saying. Americans go, oh, we're listening to it and we're seeing it and we're on some, and this is why they're shutting it down. This is why the U.S. government's coming in, because what's happening right now is there is a sea change in America. That the American the consciousness has been awoken and enraged by the genocide that's taking place against the Palestinian people. And we know who to blame. We know what names to call out. And we are calling out Israel, and we are calling out Zionism, and we are calling out AIPAC, and we are calling out their supporters in Congress who continue to send weapons while children are having their hands tied behind their back and shot and buried in mass graves. Yeah, we're calling it out. And it's scared the establishment, because this isn't just isolated. This is the country awakening. And student campuses, the student bodies they're relatively homogeneous across the country. They might have different letters on their jackets and all this, but students are students are students are students. And American students are waking up to what's going on, and they're waking up. And with them comes the communities, especially, say, more progressive parts of the communities. And that's Joe Biden's bailiwick. That's his voting base, and he's losing them, and it scares him. So he's trying to shut this thing down. If you don't think that these orders are coming out from the highest places, either at the state in Texas from Governor Abbott, because here we have a weird thing in America where Christian evangelicals, Christian Zionists, they call themselves, are very much pro-Israel because they believe in, it's the term they call it.
It's the statement in the Bible that basically says that Jewish people have to be in the Holy Land in order
for Armageddon to happen. And then but there's a term they use about where everybody goes up to heaven and then stay behind. And there's a whole series of books written about the people that didn't go to heaven, they stay behind. I guess I'd be one of those stay behind people, but who knows? The rapture. There. Thank you very much. I was struggling with that word. As you'll find out, Sabrina, as you get older, you'll be struggling with words too. It's just like it's right there. It's right there. I can't get it. So I thank whoever came up with that. But the rapture. So we have a weird thing in the United States where we have progressives who are supporting Israel, and we have conservatives who support Israel, and they're both scared to death because the base of population that they thought would be with them, they're disgusted by what they see. They're alarmed by what they see, this genocide. And so they're awakening. So they're shutting it down. I would ask everybody in your audience to look up Kent State and see what happened at Kent State, and ask yourself, do you want that to happen? And it wasn't just Kent State. And again, you're going to have to forgive me, because at the same day there was another shooting at a black college for the same thing. The black students came out against the war, and the police and the cops came down and they shot people. But because it happened in the 60s and black people weren't considered to be quite the same as white people, the dead white people got on the front page of Life magazine, and not the dead black students. But there was two colleges at the same time where they had these anti-war things, and the police and the state troopers came out and shot them. That's the direction we're heading here, ladies and gentlemen. That's the direction we're heading. We're heading to where students are going to be killed on campus for speaking out against bad policy. That's not a death sentence.
And by the way, 3 of the students that were killed during the Kent State massacre were Jewish, by the way, for people who are not aware.
Right. And I think 2 of them weren't even part of the demonstration. They were just going to class. They were just basically, bam, bullet hits them, dead. Get that. I don't want to use bad language on your show, so I'm going to respect you. Get the cops off the campus. If the kids start burning things, look what they did in Vietnam. They took over presidents' offices. They took over things. It was a heck of a lot more interactive than it is right now. But it played itself out. Generally speaking, when people start talking to you and start acknowledging, give you a right to speak, it dissipates. But here they're afraid to engage, because how can you defend genocide? How can you defend it? You can't defend it. It's indefensible. So rather than just say we're wrong, they say bring in the cops. And I'm telling you right now, I am very afraid, because this isn't going away. It's blowing up on campuses all over the country. All the students are starting to rally around the cause, and I'm just really concerned that some stupid governor is going to call in the National Guard, these guys who were trained to go murder Iraq. I'm sorry, National Guard, but you lost my respect. You guys, bomb wedding parties in Afghanistan. You kicked down doors and terrorized Iraqi families. You weren't over there defending democracy, defending freedom. You did some really bad stuff, and you guys know you did some really bad stuff. And now you've come back here with that skill set, that antisocial behavior that's ingrained in you are, and then we're going to put you on a college campus and give you guns and ammunition and put you up against our students? Hell no. It can't happen, but it's going to. And we'll be playing Crosby, Still, Nash and Young, Ohio all over again.
Yeah, I think some people may not realize that, but when they call in the National Guard, that's not to make peace. That's actually to take action and to escalate the situation. I could see Ron DeSantis doing that, Scott.
I can see DeSantis. I can see Abbott doing it. And the thing about it, too, is that, like at Kent State, what they acknowledge is the National Guard guys, they were scared themselves. They weren't well trained. And so, the only thing more dangerous than a scared cop with a gun is a scared National Guardsman with a gun, because the scared National Guardsman's gun is more powerful, can do a lot more damage. This is this bad day for America. I mean, sometimes we have to suffer as a nation to learn and to improve. But man, the suffering hurts. The suffering's bad. And I'm just afraid that in order to turn the corner on this issue, there may be some tragedy attached to it. And I hope not. And I hope that we can get enough people to, weigh in on this. Why are you, did you see the one, she was an economy professor, and one of her students was being beaten up by the cops. And all she did is said, why are you doing this to him? She didn't touch a cop. She wasn't anywhere near a cop. And then this stupid burly guy came in, arrested her, and then they George Floyd her.
Yep.
Put her on the ground and put the knee on her neck. And I'm like, you guys haven't learned a damn thing. First of all, she's a female economy professor. She's not carrying anything. Why are you using this force on her? Why are you treating her like these? This is why. And they were sergeants. They wore sergeant stripes, so they should know better. Cops don't know better. Cops are trained to do one thing: beat people up and shoot people. We don't have smart cops anymore. I'm sure somewhere in some town they're going to say, I live in Bethlehem, New York. We have some smart cops. Want to know why? Because our community makes them be smart. Our community actually holds them to account when they do things. When I was a firefighter, I'd respond in the ambulance to DUI calls. And man, you never saw more respectful cops in your life when they pulled over some DUI people, because that was a citizen. And even though they were going to get arrested, and even though they were going to get fingerprinted, and even though they were going to man, it was the most polite thing in the world, kid gloves, all this kind of stuff, because the community holds them to account. But I also saw them treat people who weren't of the community. I don't know, like the black kid walking over from Albany across the Delaware Avenue Bridge into all-white Delmar and being pulled over by a cop saying, what are you doing in Delmar? What do you mean? It's America. Delmar isn't your own city. I'm an American citizen walking in America. Yeah, but you don't belong here. What do you mean I don't belong here? You're talking back to me, boy. Bam, 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 bam. And next thing you know, you got a beat up black kid in the lockup. Yeah, Bethlehem cops can be that bad too. But our cops aren't well trained, especially when it comes to use of force. And a lot of them come from the military, where they've been traumatized, where they've been conditioned to do really bad things. Word of advice to all city planners out there: in your police department, never give a veteran's preference again. In fact, make military service automatically disqualifying. If you ever served in the military, you can never be a cop in America, because cops aren't supposed to think like you've been trained to think. Cops are supposed to think differently. The American people aren't the enemy. You're not going out on patrol against the enemy. You're not driving through hostile territory. You're driving through somebody's neighborhood. You're driving through a hometown populated by American citizens whom you're supposed to protect. But that's not the thinking. They come out, they think they're back in Baghdad. They think they're back in, Kabul. They're going out on patrol. They're gearing up. There's the enemy out there. I'm going to get these guys. And they do. And now they're going on college campuses and taking down students whose job it is to challenge everything. That's what a college kid's supposed to do. Go there and challenge everything. You want to teach people to be critical thinkers. You should be applauding them for what they're doing. Applauding them. It's a learning experience to sit there and say, I'm challenging. And man, how do you get a civic-minded? There's so many Americans just unplugged from civil life. Go out and you get your job. You go to work. You come home, and you just don't care about what's going on. You've unplugged because you're overworked and all that stuff. These kids are out there. They're engaged. They're doing what American citizens should be doing, engaging, holding people to account. That's what America's about. And we're sending in cops to beat them up. And soon we're going to send in the National Guard to shoot them.
And the other thing I want to say with this particular population, this is the population or the age group that is typically recruited by the military, and military recruitment is down in the United States. That's another thing I think that, it's very different than when you joined, than when my dad joined. Like now people have a very different mindset about joining the military. And I want to ask your question about that. And then one more after this one, which is, what do you think about this statement that Joe Biden made a couple of days ago that they may have to send in U.S. troops into Israel? How do you feel about that? And considering that military recruitment has decreased, do you have this any insight or any intuition that the U.S. government could possibly implement the draft again?
I don't know if the American people are so zombified as to tolerate a draft when there's not a need. Let's put it this way. If Russia or China attacked us today, I don't think you'd have to have a draft. I think every American would go out and volunteer to defend their country. If people are coming across the border doing harm to the American people, we'd be there because we love our country. But the military has been destroyed in terms of being seen as the American people as a viable institution of American values, because all we do is invade countries. All we do is kill people. We go overseas, and it's not about improving life here at home. It's about bullying people, imposing our will. It's not even about fighting terrorism, we found out, because, we're not killing terrorists. We're just killing innocent men and women and children who are in their home in a village in a land that we don't understand culturally. We don't speak the language. We view them as the enemy because they view us as the occupier because we are the occupier. And so it's very difficult right now. And also it's about motivation. I would imagine if your father is roughly my age, that he joined for patriotic reasons, that he got up one morning and said, I'm going to serve my country. I'm serving America. Now, it's also employment. You get a paycheck, but you don't get a big paycheck. I didn't get a big paycheck. You got paid so you could. But I joined to serve my country. I put myself at the service of my nation, and that's a whole different mindset than saying I'm unemployed. I have no other options. Okay, I'm going to go in the military, and I'm going to get 3 hots and a cot, and maybe a GI Bill so I can go to college when this is done. But you're not joining, because you want to be in the military. You're joining because you have no other options. That's the option of last resort. And the level of motivation for those, and you're joining in hopes that you don't get deployed. Whereas when I joined, I know, Sabrina, you're going to get angry at me, I prayed for war every single second I was in the military. Get him off the air! He's a bastard. But I joined, and I was trained to a certain skill set, and I'm like, let me do it. Let me do it. Let me do what I'm trained to do. Let me do. Today, I'm a different thing. Like, I'd like to imagine people joining the military, becoming the best trained people in the world, and never using it. Wouldn't that be nice? But back then, I was, until I went to war, I wanted to go to war. And once I went to war, I never wanted to go to war again, because you quickly learn that it ain't what it's not what Hollywood says it is. But the mindset was leaning forward. Today, if you're leaning forward, I'm afraid of the people that are leaning forward, because we've also lowered the standards. I actually had to go through some very serious, testing and psychological batteries, and test after test after test after test, with doctors looking at you, checking boxes. You ever seen that movie, The Right Stuff? You know how the astronauts were getting tested before they went up the Mercury? That's what it felt like in the early 1980s, going into the Marine Corps Officer Commissioning Program, just testing, just winnowing people out so that the only people left were people that met the standard that you wanted. Today, we don't do any of that. Basically, if you got a pulse, you're in. And now if you got people leaning forward wanting to kill, why? To serve your country, to fight the enemy, or are you just a psychopath who wants to go and kill people? And I'm concerned right now that a lot of the people that are leaning forward saying they want to go kill are just psychopaths. And then the beauty of it is when they leave the military, they join the police.
Yep.
They're psychopaths leaning in, wanting to kill the enemy, which is the American people. But no, there's a reason why the U.S. Army is having a recruiting problem, because there's a lack of motivation. I think the only branch that's not having a recruiting problem right now is the Marine Corps, because the Marine Corps still puts itself up as a higher standard. We don't lower our standards. So when you want to join the Marines, you know what you're getting in. But even the Marine Corps has changed fundamentally. I heard they have yellow cards for timeouts. I mean, I couldn't imagine, timeout. Can't yell at me anymore. I got a timeout card. Man, if I pulled a timeout card back then, boom, 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 kick me to the ground, beat me up, timeout, my. No, but I'm not saying that that's the right way to train. I'm just saying that was the way they trained us back then, was a lot of hands-on love. But not today. A timeout card and all that kind of stuff. Maybe it's better, but the military today is not the military of the past. Different levels of motivation. A lot of it is based upon the concept of a job, not an adventure, a paycheck, and the kind of things that you'd be asked to do in war is an inconvenience. And now imagine taking this army, this military, and telling them, you're not going to Iraq where you get to kick down doors and, kill civilians. We're sending you to Ukraine, where we're going to lose 3,000 guys in 4 days. And you said, but sir, our unit's only 5,000 strong. Welcome to the real war, buddy. You're all going to die. And can you imagine them back then going, because I have to tell you, when we were trained to fight the Soviets, I was the intelligence officer, and I would tell my guys, if we go up against the Soviets, we're all going to die. That's just the way it is. They got a bigger army, more artillery, and in the end, we're going to die. And the Marines are like, all right, but we'll take some out before we go down. We'll make this a fight. Today, I can't imagine people going, oh, okay, we'll make a fight. There we go. What about my college education? I signed up for the college degree program, and I'm going to die. You can't kill me. Right. And I wasn't so. In order to pay my bills, I got a second job at Home Depot on the weekends. And if you send me off to war, how am I going to have that second job? You're not supposed to have a second job. You're in the military. But then I can't afford the car payment on the Camaro I bought and all. I think the motivation today, and I know there's going to be a lot of people that are mad at me because they did join up for patriotic reasons. I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm saying that of the majority of American soldiers out there today, that motivation is not there. And there's a reason why the U.S. Army was 15,000 short on their recruiting goal last year, because nobody wants to join the Army, the Navy, or the Air Force today.
You're right. One more question for you, Scott. What if we could have an even bigger movement? What if we could take, this movement here, the pro-Palestine movement, minus the police, if we could take all of those kids at the college campuses and everybody else that's out in the street, marching for the Palestinian people. And then we could also take all the people that are tired of this war in Ukraine, right? This is where I would push on people that are part of the Freedom Caucus, that people like MTG, who's tired of all this money going to Ukraine, to mobilize people within her own district, her own constituency, and get them out in the streets. What if we had a group of people that were against the war in Ukraine actually merged with the people who were against the war in Gaza? That could actually probably get us to that 5%, which they say you need to have like a massive movement in this country. What would you think about something like that? And then it would just be a big anti-war movement. I told you that I went to Russia back in May. That was part of a campaign. I actually spoke at a restaurant in New York City in December of 2022. And at the time I was very
worried about nuclear war. I just wrote a book about my time as a weapons inspector in the Soviet Union, getting rid of nuclear weapons. And I took a look at what was going on and, how we're actually starting to emphasize nuclear weapons and stuff. And so in there, I said, in the treaty that I was part of, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, was signed by Ronald Reagan in December of 1987. Ronald Reagan was a staunch anti-communist. I mean, if you go and look at his record, he's no, tree hugging, arms control kind of guy. He's the guy that made a joke, thought he was off campus about, well, Orby, the missiles are flying. They'll be in your territory in 20 minutes or something like that. So he joked about nuclear war, but he signed it. Why? In June of 1982, 1 million people took to the streets in Central Park in New York City. 1 million people from all over America. And they came together for one thing and one thing only: to say no to nuclear war. To say no to nuclear war. And that voice, what they did, woke up the political possibilities. It took a guy like Ronald Reagan, who said, my people want me to think about nuclear disarmament. And 5 years later, he signed the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. It began a process that led to this arch conservative guy signing a treaty that got rid of nuclear weapons. I mentioned that at the time, and I said, we need to do that again. In June of 2024, on the eve of a presidential elections, we need 1 million people in the streets of Central Park protesting against nuclear war, not against, protesting for disarmament. I'm tired of the protesting against things. What are we here for? We're here for nuclear disarmament. We're here for peace. We're here, for, peaceful coexistence. And I went out and I worked hard for that. There was a movement, the Rage Against the War Machine rally in February, and they were supposed to bring everybody together. And the problem is, you can't bring everybody together. At least it hasn't been shown. Most of the classic peace movements avoided that rally because they said, well, no, that's not what we're about. Within that rally, people came in from different political spectrums and they started fighting against one another, and the rally wasn't nearly as effective, and they had to postpone the second one because it fizzled out. Sabrina, we need this. We have to have this. If we can't put 1 million people in Central Park, we're never going to achieve anything. If we can't put 1 million people in Washington, D.C., surrounding the Lincoln Memorial, going down the mall towards Congress, pack that with 1 million people. If we can't replicate what Martin Luther King was able to do for the civil rights movement, then we're not going to be able to save it. What do I think about it? We have to do it. But how? How's the question? How do we get people to put aside their petty differences? Because at the end of the day, I don't care if you're a libertarian. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're a communist. I don't care any of that stuff. All I care about is that you are pro-disarmament or pro-peace. And if we can come together as Americans and say we've put aside our petty differences, we're now working together, like the American citizens we should be, yeah, we could do this. But how do we do it? I mean, I have to tell you, I'm demoralized by this because I thought for sure I could get the American public to wake up about nuclear war. Nobody takes it seriously. And when they do talk about it, they're like, yeah, we can win that. No, you can't. You can't win nuclear war. We learned that one. When I grew up, we learned you can't win nuclear war. That's why getting rid of nuclear weapons was a good thing. War is bad. How do we tell people war is bad? When I grew up, there was enough survivors of World War II who would just sit there and go, yeah, war's pretty bad. We're with you. There was enough Vietnam vet guys who were still, limber enough to be out there. War's bad. War's bad. Today, we have a bunch of, disgruntled global war on terrorism guys. Some of them are saying war is bad, but most of them are just like, man, let's go out there and kill more terrorists. Let's go out and do this. So the military is not, the military is not on our side. The military is not saying, yeah, man, we don't need to be doing that. How How do we do it, Sabrina? There's the ultimate challenge. I mean, I'm with you. I tell you what, if you and I and others could get Danny Haifong, if we could get Max Blumenthal, we can get Aaron Mate, we can get all these people and their respective audiences together. If we could put 1 million people in New York City, in Central Park, if we could put 1 million people in the mall, if we could have put 1 million people in San Francisco, this is a nation of 320, 330 million people. If we can get enough people mobilized just to say, we believe in peace, give peace a chance, we could do something. But how do we get 1 million people to do that? How do we get them to wake up one day and say, I want to go to, again, I bring back the 60s songs with Joni Mitchell. By the time we got to Woodstock, we were 500,000 strong. That's just people walking, baby. All we have to do is get people one day to say, I'm going to New York City. I'm going to Central Park. I'm going to Washington, D.C. And, if we can get the permits, we get the permits. If not, flood the damn city anyways. Just flood it, shut it down. Didn't they wasn't there this thing they called a flash mob? Like you put it on the phone, people show up, a flash mob. Let's flash mob Washington, D.C. Let's flash mob Central Park. It doesn't need a permit. We're just going to say, I want everybody in this area to show up on this day and just stand there and make a point. Stand there and make a point. We're shutting the city down. We're making a point for peace. Do it to Washington, D.C. Do it to San Francisco. Shut it down. Shut her down. Can we do it? I'd like to believe we could. I don't know. Maybe you have better ideas. I'm not, me and my flash mob idea, who knows? That's probably the dumbest idea in the world. But come up with a better idea.
No, I think these are all really good points. I mean, even during the civil rights movement, they didn't have a lot of the resources that we do have. There was no internet, there was no Twitter, no Facebook or anything like that. They were able to mobilize simply by calling people on the phone, and getting thousands of people out in the street. And so I think it's just, I totally hear you. I totally hear you. Well, Scott, thank you so much. Anything coming up that people should know about?
Nope, just the trip. We're going to make a documentary about it. It's going to be a pretty cool documentary. And so later on, we're going to start putting out requests for support because documentaries don't make themselves. And even though we're going to go over there, we're going to capture on film. There's these creatures called film editors, and they charge a lot of money. And then the guys who do the music charge money. And so we will be putting out appeals for support on that. But I think it's a worthy cause. And like I said, this is going to be a cool trip. This is going to be one of these feel-good trips where when you come back, you're going to say, I actually made a difference, because we are going to have an actual impact on people's lives. We're going to bring people together. We're going to try and tear down walls of ignorance, walls of fear, and bring people together and begin this dialogue and this communications that is absolutely necessary for Americans and Russians to relearn how to live in peace and harmony.
All right, Scott Ritter, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, that was Scott Ritter. He is a plethora of information. It's always great when Scott comes on because I feel like he can break things down in a way that some of us just cannot, because we just don't have the experience. He does have that Intel experience. We're going to go ahead and shout out patrons. We have 3 more stories to cover, and then we will do a Zoom call in after the show. I know I haven't done one this week, so I actually have that link pinned to the chat so you guys can call in and we can chat about today's topic. So let's go ahead and shout out patrons first. Thank you guys so much for being a Sabby patron of the show. You're keeping the lights on around here, and I don't know what happened to my logo up there. I messed up something somehow. Anyhow, shout out to everyone who's a Sabby patron. If you're interested, I have 5 categories: ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters. I don't know why I said it like that. That Ben Shapiro mocking voice is coming back. Sabbies are also here in the house. And of course, members. All of their names are listed here. And you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you so much. For those, that was a little bit of an inside joke. We were joking about Ben Shapiro last night. So that's where that comes from. What else are we going to discuss today, guys? Let's go ahead and share that thumbnail for you. Pretty interesting topic. So, of course, Scott Ritter was just here. So, Scott Ritter already joined. We're also going to discuss Hassan Piker and Piers Morgan debate. I think this is probably the most tense debate I've seen on Piers Morgan's show about Israel and Gaza. It really does go off the rails at one point during this conversation. We're also going to discuss Amanda Seales goes off. Now, she was on Club Shay Shay, and she had quite a bit to say about media. So we'll get into that. And we do want to end with some good news, which is the FTC bans worker clause. This is really good news. Of course, there will be some challenge that is going to be met with this. But that being said, right now it's good news, and we are going to talk about that as well. Let's go ahead and dive into some of the comments here. Travers says Sabby wore her good lipstick for the end of That's funny. This is my good lipstick. How did you know? How did you know, Travers? Marvega says, thank you, Sabby, for this channel. You are welcome. Shout out to New York Varsity for the super chat. Brilliant. On the other side of the world are school teachers, nurses, doctors who are not with this gangster shh. Humanizing is the path to peace. Thank you, Stan. Is America the leader in supplying financial aid internationally versus domestically? If so, why? Thanks. Yeah, good question. If you mean militarily, yes. Yes, we are. Thank you, Lorenzo. Thank you, Scott and Sabby, for your outlook. Thank you. Thank you, Timbo. Scott knows what he is talking about. I will agree with that. Marie, I tell people all the time, Gen Z is not weak. They just refuse to obey the wealthy elites blindly. I agree. I hear you there. Thank you, Guy D. There will be no progress until the Zionists are removed from power in the U.S. They have stolen our country and our future. Thank you, MMB. There's a peace march starting on May 7th. They are walking to D.C. We will be in Washington July 7th. Hopefully people will join in the masses. If you can put the link for that, if there's a website or something that you can put in the chat, let me know, because that would be good. And thank you for the super chat, Aislinn. And thank you, Anna. USC limiting the graduation. Yeah, I heard. University of Southern California. Aye. Let's take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you so much. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin hemp. Unarmed demonstrators were attacked by the police and National Guardsmen in Ohio, Kent State, Kansas, Wisconsin, Illinois, New York, California, and Puerto Rico, as well as Mississippi, Jackson State. That was the one he was referring to. And North Carolina, Orangeburg. Thousands were beaten and injured. Hundreds were wounded and hospitalized. At least 17 were killed. That's page 63, The War at Home by Brian Glick. Thank you for that. And thank you for the $5 tip, Skip, who says, thanks. Based. All right, Eric, don't forget about the patrons. I think I just moved it to the next one, but don't forget about the other patrons, because I did the other ones. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get to our next story. Let's get into this debate with Hassan Piker and Piers Morgan and a couple of other cringe guests. But there are some interesting points that are made during this debate. And this really cracks me up. It says, you're effing terrorists. If you guys have not seen this exchange, this is probably the most tense debate I've seen on Piers Morgan's show. Because Hassan went on there and he went off, basically, to make a long story short here. We're going to get started with this question here about whether or not the Gaza protests are performative. So let's get started at this point here.
Absolutely not. I don't think that, I mean, all protests are technically performative, obviously, but there's a very clear-cut goal for the group of students at Columbia and many other universities. I was in Melbourne not that long ago, and I attended a Palestinian protest there, a Palestinian rally there, and the students there were also demanding the exact same thing, that they divest, their colleges divest from a lot of the companies that are aligned with the state of Israel, a lot of the companies that are directly involved in operations in the West Bank, a lot of the companies that are playing a role in the regular maintenance of the apartheid regime of Israel and helping Israel conduct an ethnic cleansing campaign. That is the ultimate goal. That is why they're trying to very clearly cause a little bit of a disruption and engage in.
But are you comfortable? Okay, but are you comfortable,
the most American thing you can do?
Are you comfortable with the
disobedience.
ones who are seen chanting support for Hamas or chanting about Intifada?
So again, we're going to change the name of Piers Morgan's show from Piers Morgan Uncensored to Piers Morgan Interrupted. Because every time someone is making a solid point that actually goes against the state of Israel, there's a lot of interruption on the show. And you'll see that through this discussion as well. So Piers Morgan is trying to bring it back in, reel it back in, and he's going to try to get Hassan Piker here to admit that what happened on October 7th was a bad thing, right? This is what he's going to try to get him to do. Watch this.
I am perfectly comfortable with people chanting about the Intifada. As far as the Hamas thing goes, any kind of protest is always going to have a litany of random people, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. You have to look at the actual tangible goals that the protest movement is stating they're interested in. And I think that those goals, and I think you will agree with me on this, Piers, I think those goals are pretty valid overall. I think that they want to, one, recenter the attention to the genocide that is ongoing in Gaza, and two, demand that their tuition dollars do not go to operations in Israel. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a campus. There's going to be a sister campus that is being built in Tel Aviv right now for Columbia University.
I told you guys. I told you that Columbia University was known as a Ziostute, right? It's known as a Zionist institution. I told you.
This means that Columbia University, which once housed the likes of the late, great Edward Said and many others, and that currently has many Palestinian students who pay tuition for projects such as this one, will not be able to go to that sister campus. I find that abhorrent, but it's everyday existence
All right.
in Israel.
Let me bring in Emily. You've been listening to all this. Your response?
With all due respect, Hassan, why do you feel that Columbia, or any college for that matter, owes you to divest from Israel? Why do you think your opinion is correct? Because so far, I heard the classic buzzwords: apartheid, discriminatory, ethnic cleansing, and genocide, which is funny because it's all the exact opposite. So if...
Pause. So do you guys see what's happening now? Now the word apartheid is considered to be a buzzword, right? Not real. Apartheid applied to South Africa, but when it comes to the state of Israel, that is a buzzword. This is not a real thing. And this is why some of the press outlets refuse to use the words apartheid, occupation, and oppression. Because if you continue to say it and you use it enough, people will start to repeat it and it starts to sink in, and then people see it as true. But in this case, it is true. So they knew not to use those words. And if they did use those words, they used it in such a way that said the pro-Hamas supporters are stating that Israel is an apartheid state. So they frame it in such a way to make it seem like the protesters are the ones that are in the wrong and they don't know what they're talking about. She'll continue to lie.
I may ask you, what about Israel is apartheid? You also just said the students in Israel, the campus in Israel would not allow Palestinians to join. Are you confused, or do you know nothing about the country of Israel? Because let me remind you, Jews are not allowed in the West Bank and Gaza. However, Arabs have full Israeli citizenship, have the rights, are members of the Knesset, which is the equivalence of, you can think of Congress, and even prosecuted a former Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, an Arab judge. So what apartheid exactly are you speaking about? What genocide? What ethnic cleansing? And secondly, how dare you say it's okay to talk about an intifada? Let me remind you, the intifada last time it happened in Israel consisted of thousands of people dying in bus bombings. So are you saying that you support terrorism and killing innocent people?
So do you see how she framed that? And it's the same way that Piers Morgan has been framing the argument as well, right? They basically say that anything that you say that's negative about Israel is a lie. Then they ask for you to prove it. Then when you try to prove it, they constantly interrupt you. Everybody is lying about Israel. Did you guys know this? All the human rights organizations are apparently lying about Israel. Everybody is lying about Israel, even though they have data to prove what they're talking about, right? So watch this.
Well, intifada simply just means revolution, and I'm an American, and in 1776,
violent
we did
revolution.
one of those, and it was pretty fucking good. Yeah. What do you think? The American?
Okay,
do you think the American Revolution
we
was a
also
Hitler
bombed
party? Of course
Hiroshima.
not.
We also bombed Hiroshima.
Don't. Yeah, I know, and that was also unjust and unimaginably cruel. But of course.
Pause, and I'll let him finish. Sorry to interrupt him there, but this is important. Notice she brought up the Hiroshima. Notice she brought up the Hiroshima point. That's the same talking point that Ben Shapiro used in the video we were discussing last night. I told you that it's a network of Zionists. They all repeat the same talking points. So now it has been passed along through this whole PR system that they have. Let's bring up Hiroshima. Not realizing that's not a winning point, man. That's not a good example. Because a lot of people today don't think that's okay. That's the thing. And just because something happened in the past doesn't mean it's okay to do it again today. You're supposed to look at the past and you're supposed to learn from it. And you're supposed to grow and move on from the history. You're not supposed to repeat and make the same mistakes that you made in the past that were obviously problematic.
Of course, the Israel defender is also defending nuking civilians and killing them by the hundreds of thousands. Now listen, let's get back.
But when it goes
let's
against
refocus
it,
the conversation
unjust.
to the points that you made. Let's refocus the conversation to the points that you made.
Okay, look,
you said,
just to remind everybody,
about?
I'm actually moderating this, but that's an interesting point that Emily just raised, Hassan. It does seem that you're very selective about the violence that you support. That when you support it, it's justified. When other people use things in a violent way that you don't support, it's unjustified. Seems like it's all skewed to what Hassan Piker thinks.
Well, not necessarily just what I think. I think that there are obvious markers, obvious boundaries. I don't think violence against civilians is justified. I have talked about October 7 on this very same show, saying that it was a tragedy. It was atrocities that occurred on October 7 specifically. When you target civilians in any capacity, I think that that is unacceptable. However, this does not mean that violence will not occur in many circumstances. Violence has occurred in every single revolutionary action, many good revolutionary actions. Obviously, America bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki with an atom bomb, that was not a very good
Hamas did on
moment
October
for
the 7th,
anybody. It was not a very good moment for human civilization at all.
Was what Hamas did on October the 7th? Was what Hamas did on October the 7th an example of what you would call a justified revolution?
So do you see what they're doing now? Didn't Hassan Piker just say to them that he didn't agree with what happened on October 7th? So now this is where Piers comes in to dive in a little bit deeper and try to get him to admit that what Hamas did was wrong. Do you see how this works? They literally sandwich Hassan in between the two people who are supporting the state of Israel. They put him in the middle. He's the meat. They're the bread.
I don't look at every single act of violence. I look at
You've literally just been reciting a whole load of them.
Systems of oppression.
Why are you avoiding October the 7th?
You do it too.
No, I don't.
I'm not avoiding it. I've talked about it a million times.
Well, let me ask you one more time.
This is not what we're here to discuss.
Emily, hang on.
This is not what we're here to discuss.
Let me just ask you directly one more time. Let me ask you one more time. Do you believe what happened on October the 7th was a justified act of revolution? Yes or no?
I do not, and I do think that. Oh, wait, hold on. That's let me clarify. Let me clarify something very important here. Events that unfolded on October 7 were atrocities. That much is clear. Those atrocities could have been avoided if Israel was not an apartheid regime. Israel has been an apartheid regime for 75 years.
Can you answer how Israel's an apartheid regime?
In the
because you keep repeating.
Pause. So you see what's happening here? So they got Hassan to admit that he does not agree with what Hamas did on October 7th. But then when he goes on to explain that that would not have happened had Israel not occupied the Palestinian people, oppressed the Palestinian people, and then also, of course, implemented apartheid. This would have never happened. You would have never had a Hamas. This is what he's trying to say. Now, once he starts to explain the history and what Israel has done that led to October 7th, that is when the interruption occurs. So now she swoops in. We'll call her Zionist Barbie. She swoops in here, and then she wants him to define what he means by apartheid. Anything to silence the truth about Israel.
No, you can't just chime in. You can't just
Back
chime in.
it
You
with
ask me a question.
evidence.
You want it?
Why
you ask
is
me a question.
Israel an
I'm going to give
apartheid
you an
regime?
answer.
Because you're repeating
Israel
these
has been an
lies.
apartheid
Go
regime
ahead,
since
please.
its inception.
How
Until
so?
1967, Israel was an apartheid regime for the Palestinian citizens of Israel, the Arabs, as you called them. There was a two-tier criminal justice system. They were subjected to the military court processes and not the civil court processes until 1967. After 1967, they got citizenship. There are obviously still many different social issues that pertain to the Palestinian citizens of Israel, the Arabs that are living in Israel, those who are not Jewish, of course. However, Israel currently is occupying the West Bank. There are more than 2 million Palestinians that live in the West Bank. Israel's illegally occupying the West Bank. There are checkpoints. There are license plates that restrict Palestinian travel. The Israeli operations in the West Bank have destroyed Palestinian statehood. Now, of course, all of this is readily available for those who want to learn about it, yourself included. I hope you look it up. B'Tselem is an Israeli human rights organization which declared Israel to be an apartheid regime in 2021, in the April of 2021. Amnesty International declared Israel to be an apartheid regime.
So he's starting to give sources that declared Israel to be an apartheid state. And once again, so now it's PIERS's turn to come in and interrupt. Again, they asked for data. They asked for sources. They're asking you to define it. And then when you start to break it down and you start to give a little too much information, then it's time for them to come in and to interrupt. So Hassan is basically dropping facts here. And listen, I don't agree with Hassan on everything, you know. I don't agree on still supporting the Democratic Party, but I do agree with him on Israel and Gaza when it comes to this issue. So I think the thing is like they're taking turns. First, it's Zionist Barbie. Then comes Ken's dad. We're going to call Pierce Ken's dad. Ken's dad comes in and they're taking turns to interrupt him so that too much information about Israel it doesn't get out. We've seen this with every person that comes onto the show that is on the pro-Palestinian side. They do the same thing with Norm Finkelstein, and Norm Finkelstein knows a lot about this and goes into great detail. They've done this before. I think Crystal Ball was recently on there. Like everyone that comes on to argue that point, they do this with them.
Okay, hang on. Before I just want to bring in our two British panelists here, but just finally, just to clarify, Hassan, I can't quite work out whether you said you do think October the 7th was an unjustified act of revolution or whether you changed your mind. So can you clarify?
I think that violent means of maintaining an apartheid is inevitably going to yield violent retaliation.
So was it justified?
Something that is completely avoidable.
Was it justified?
Civilian deaths are never justified.
You know what, Hassan?
Hang on, Emily. Emily.
See this? See how they take turns? So he said civilian deaths are not justified. We literally have a whole Mattel series here, guys. We can go down the line. We have Ken's dad, which is Piers Morgan. You have Hassan. Hassan is not Ken. Hassan is Ken's friend. There was a collection of them called Barbie and the Rockers, right? And so Ken had a friend, a rocker Ken, that had the dark hair. So Hassan is Ken's friend. Then you got Zionist Barbie here. The woman next to her, this is Christy. Christy was the black Barbie doll. At that time when I was growing up, there was only one black Barbie doll and her name was Christy. So this is Christy, and that's Ken here at the end. Let's continue.
Goldberg, Poland's mother in the eyes. No, you look this person's mother in the eyes and you tell him that this was justified. You tell him his arm being blown off and being held in captivity for 200 days is justified.
I do love that the Israel defender has no capacity to fucking hear anything I'm saying.
Palestinians who are made of identity.
It just if you're not going to respect me
You
and
think
listen
that
to what
we're
I have to
occupying
say,
the West
which,
Bank?
by the way,
you
of course
think
you
we
don't
occupied
respect.
Gaza?
Oh, if you talk
Look what
over each other,
happened.
nobody
I'll
can
just
hear
keep
you. I
speaking
just
over
want to
you.
give-
That's what
think.
you
It's
do.
not
I just
I
want to
think.
give
It's not I
Hassan-
think. It's the entire
Hassan,
world knows.
No, it is you
Okay?
think.
It's the
Hang
entire
on,
world
Things that
Emily,
promote
please.
your narrative.
Let me handle this, Emily. Hassan, just before I come to the two people who are with me here, I just need some clarity here, because it seems like you're dancing around whether you think October the 7th was justified
why are
or
we
not.
doing this? Why are we doing this back and forth masturbation? I've already given you my fucking
Piers, why are you
position.
doing this?
I'm
He's
sick and
happy.
tired
It's
of
Jews
repeating it
being
over and over
killed.
again.
Okay, I
Because
just
it's
want to-
Jews, it's okay.
Ask this
Emily,
demon
stop
next to
talking.
me
Group, it's
wearing
Emily,
a fucking
come back
IDF
to you.
dog
Only
tag.
when it's Jews, it's okay.
Please
When
stop
it's
This
shouting
fucking
at each
demon next
other.
to me wearing an IDF dog tag if she actually thinks Israel's
No,
actions are
bring
justifiable.
them home.
Do you
It's
see
to
me
bring the
rocking the
hostages
fucking
home. The hostages
All right,
that you
you're talking
rightly
over each
believe
other.
belong in
matter.
the
All right.
You know what
tunnels
it
of
is.
Gaza.
I'm going to
know
give you
why
two.
it
Yeah.
looks
I'm going to
that
let
way.
you two
That is
calm
the
down.
same
It's
size
pointless.
and shape
We
of an
cannot
IDF
hear
dog
you
tag. You're
when you
wearing
talk over
that
each
to
other.
Troll people.
Every time recently I have some
It's funny because the two at the end here, they're just kind of like, oh my
someone
God.
from both
I'm
sides
wearing
on,
this
like
to
it
troll
goes like
people.
this.
I'm wearing this rusty necklace.
Please,
because
can you
there are
listen to
200
me,
Israeli
Emily?
civilians
Yeah,
in Gaza
All right,
right now.
can you
as
stop
hostages.
doing this to each
Hey,
other, please?
Emily,
Nobody
Emily,
can understand a
can you
word
condemn the
either of
actions
you
of
saying.
Israel?
Now let me come to Esther and James here. This is one of my problems.
No, I want to
actually.
hear if Emily condemns
No,
the actions of
Hassan,
Israel.
you
Why
will
don't you ask
please
her
let me
about that?
moderate the
Why
debate.
don't you ask her about
I don't condemn
30,000
the
people
idea.
I've got two
I
panelists
condemn
here
the
who've not
fact
had
that
a
on
word
October
yet.
7th,
Because you're a
they
fucking
kidnapped
terrorist.
Please stop
civilians from their
talking.
homes. And I think
Hassan called her a terrorist. So there was that part.
you're a terrorist.
Emily.
And I think you're a terrorist as well.
Okay. Well, I'm not the one wearing.
Because
I'm
until
not
the
one
hostages
wearing
are home,
the
don't expect the war to be
signia.
over.
Yeah, I know.
Bring
you don't
them
care about
home.
the hostages. If you
I
cared
love
about
how
the
you're
hostages,
condemning
you would
me.
be
You are
screaming at
exposing
Benjamin
your
Netanyahu.
own terrorism
Benjamin
on live
Netanyahu
television.
is the hostage
You are
killer.
exposing.
Benjamin Netanyahu has killed more hostages than
What do
Hamas
either
You
of
has.
you
need to be
think you're
condemning
achieving
Hamas
here?
talking
for
about?
not only oppressing the Palestinian people, but for spreading terrorism. I don't see your outrage at Hamas. Israel gave Gaza
All right,
back
listen,
in 2005,
I would like to, please.
and Hamas
You
has
don't
turned
think
this
you
into
both,
a
please?
I think
terrorist
Hamas is the
haven.
lesser
instead of
Emily and
building a
Hassan,
safe
can you
war.
Think about what she just said. Israel gave Gaza back. They should have never stolen it in the first place. So this is another Zionist talking point as well, trying to blame the people who are oppressed for their own oppression. We have to get past this talking point. You can't sit up there and kick people out of their homes and off their land and expect them to be, just okay with what you did to them and just go along to get along, folks. And the fact that you locked them into this open air prison, the people can't just move about freely. And then you have the illegal settlements in the West Bank. Now, one of the things that she said is that Jewish people are not allowed to go in the West Bank. Let's show you something. We'll come back to this. I want to show you something because the amount of lies that they tell. Watch this. Check this, okay? Who are Israeli settlers and why do they live on Palestinian land? Let's go down to this point right about here. Who are the settlers? Settlers are Israeli citizens who live on private Palestinian land in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Occupied. The vast majority of the settlements have been built either entirely or partially on private Palestinian land. You cannot forget this. More than 700,000 settlers, 10% of Israel's near 7 million population, now live in 150 settlements and 128 outposts dotting the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. We can also not sit here and forget the fact that it was just a month or two ago, we discussed on this show that it was revealed that Israel was selling homes here in the United States and in Canada. They were hosting events to sell homes in the West Bank to Israeli Americans right here. So many lies that they continue to tell. We'll come back in here.
Please show some
evil.
courtesy
Hamas
to
is
the other
the lesser
panelists.
evil in comparison to Israel.
Can you please stop talking, both of you, and
You
let
hear
the
me?
other two panelists have a
You want
say?
a soundbite, Pierce? I'll give you
Give
a
them some
soundbite.
courtesy, please. Some courtesy for your co-panelists here. Now, Esther, this is one of the problems I have with this whole debate, is that increasingly it just descends into a screaming match between pro-Palestinians and pro-Israelis.
and the biggest losers are the
She has
victims
no
of this
respect.
war. 33,000 dead Palestinians, over 1,500 dead Israelis. These are the biggest victims of this, because you're shouting at each other and nothing is getting, like, you're completely, forget having no courtesy for us, you're completely disrespecting actual victims of this conflict, which, by the way, didn't happen in a vacuum. And I think that's the most important thing to say about this. None of this happened in a vacuum. Of course, October the 7th was an atrocity, and it was completely unjustified. There was no justification for butchering people in the way that they did. But it didn't happen in a vacuum. A lot of the people that live in Gaza weren't even born at the time that Hamas came in power. So I really just, I despise this, you're a terrorist sympathizer, you're a genocide supporter, all of this, when really the people that we should be talking about deserve better.
Okay, James, on the wider point of these protests.
Well, I couldn't get to that part because I wanted to describe what the apartheid is, and
Okay.
Emily cut in immediately to chirp about some random shit.
Okay, you were both abusing each other. It was very unsatisfying.
It was very
let
clear.
me ask James. James, on the protests.
Yeah, dude.
On the protests, look, I believe in the right to protest. It's an absolute bedrock of any democracy. But I don't believe in the right to support terror groups publicly, or to chant about support for Hamas, or to chant about Intifada, which is a violent uprising.
Define terror groups, because basically what happens is whoever the United States government describes as a terrorist group is a terrorist group to other countries in the West. Does that mean that they actually are? And sometimes you'll look into the history and you'll see that the United States government actually created some of these groups. Oh no. Think about that. We're all going to sit here and hear this discussion, and no one wants to bring up the fact that Netanyahu himself actually funded Hamas. You're complaining about the group that your leader actually funded. Let's hear what Ken has to say.
Where's the line for you with these?
I agree. I think we have to condemn what Hamas did, and I don't think the words that have been used so far have been strong enough. I mean, it was the worst thing we've seen in a very long time. It was disgusting, appalling, awful for everyone involved. I also have a lot of sympathy, if not, I can't think of a bigger word, for the people of Gaza. It's awful, and I will agree with you. I do want a free Palestine, and I also want a free and successful Israel, but I don't want innocent people murdered. So yeah.
Pause, because Ken, he trying to ride in the middle of the fence because he still want to be friends with Barbie, and he still got his other friend Hassan. So let me explain what's really happening here. This statement that he said, it's the worst thing that we've seen happen in a long time, in reference to October 7th. If that's true, folks, has he forgotten about the Democratic Republic of the Congo? We're talking about over 6 million people have been killed in the Congo. You have children working in the mines of the Congo just so we can have rechargeable batteries in our cell phones. So how is the 1,200 people that were killed on October 7th, which some of those people were killed by the IDF, which they admit themselves, how is that worse than the 6 million people that have been killed in the Congo? Make it make sense, folks. Okay, we debunked that part.
You can't go to a protest and start shouting about support for Hamas. That's insane.
Isn't it ironic that something like this has become a haven for like the mentally unwell? You're talking about something as serious as a conflict in Israel and Gaza, and for some reason you have really uneducated people that are clearly 20 years ago would have been in an asylum supporting this openly, not even knowing the conflict, not even knowing the context of what they're supporting, and for some reason we even give it airtime. That's what upsets me.
But
These people don't deserve airtime.
Everyone is.
They don't deserve airtime. Then why are you on this show? Come on, Christy. Come on, Christy. Fall back. Why are you on the show if you feel it doesn't deserve any type of airtime?
So triggered on both sides, on all sides, and rightly so, because a lot of terrible stuff has happened. So that's where the emotion is coming from. But really, I think we all want the same thing, and that is for innocent people to not be murdered or slain in the streets.
Right. I mean, look, Hassan. Hang on, Emily, please, I'll come to you. Let me just ask Hassan. When you and Emily go at each other like you just did, nobody wins. I mean, no one can really understand a word you're saying because you're shouting over each other. You end up just calling each other terrorists. There's no sensible dialogue here. There's no constructive conversation. It's just two implacably opposed sides abusing each other. Do you understand that?
Yeah, listen, Piers, okay? This is going to always be a very heated discussion, okay? Having a conversation about how heated this discussion is utterly unproductive. Every single moment that we use on air, not talking about every single university building being desecrated, destroyed. The fact that we're having this conversation on the eve of hundreds of mass graves being unearthed right now in many different parts of Gaza around hospitals that Israel had laid siege to is disgusting. I agree. I came on here, as I have done last time as well, and as I will probably do in the future as well, with one simple goal in mind, which is to address all of the misinformation that surrounds stuff like this. As far as the crackhead Barbie thing goes, yeah, she's a random TikTok influencer who gives a shit about what she has to say. She's obviously doing it for clout. But the students over at Columbia, okay, the students that I have talked to at the Columbia University Apartheid Divest group, the students that I've talked to from Jewish Voice for Peace.
All right, Emily, let me just ask you.
That part right there. There was something that happened here that was a little bit odd. Watch it again, guys, and make sure it's not just me that noticed it. Because it seems like when they obviously recorded this, and it seems like once he mentioned Jewish Voices for Peace, part of this was edited out. Watch.
She's a random TikTok influencer who gives a shit about what she has to say. She's obviously doing it for clout. But the students over at Columbia, okay, the students that I have talked to at the Columbia University Apartheid Divest group, the students that I've talked to from Jewish Voice for Peace.
All right, Emily, let me.
Hello? Did somebody just cut him off after he said Jewish Voices for Peace? Was that like a hard edit? Okay, we're going to fast forward to another part here. I think we've had enough of Zionist Barbie, but there's a part here that I do want to get to where Hassan actually, Ken's friend starts to clash with Ken. This part right here.
People here. James.
If anyone is using hostages, surely it's Hamas, Hassan. How can you say that? How can you use that argument? That's a crazy thing to say. It's Hamas
What do you mean, how can I use that
taken
argument?
these
There
people
are
from their homes,
tens of thousands of people in
murdered their
Israel.
relatives.
There are currently tens of thousands of Israeli citizens right now in the streets of Israel, in the streets of Tel Aviv, outside of Benjamin Netanyahu's house, protesting every single day. What are they protesting? They're protesting for Benjamin Netanyahu to facilitate a ceasefire with Hamas so that they can actually bring the hostages home. That is precisely the number one goal of the family members of the hostages.
Who
and
is
if
using
anyone
the hostages?
on this panel was being even a little bit honest, they would recognize the reality that, listen, just listen.
You didn't listen to my question.
Listen to what I'm saying, and you will understand perhaps what I'm trying to imply
That's very
here.
patronizing.
Utilizing the hostages. Yeah, I am being patronizing. I don't know who the fuck you are, and you're over here chirping all the way from fucking London about Palestine and doing a both sides are fucking fine type bullshit.
You do know who he is. He's your friend. That is Ken, Hassan. That's your friend. You guys are bros and pals. He said, you're over here freaking out about Palestine.
Where you're talking about how you want to fucking free Palestine, but also simultaneously, both sides got a lot going on. Shut the fuck up. You don't know anything, okay? I don't give a shit about what your perspective is.
I agree.
Hassan
with
doesn't
quite
like
a lot
what you
of the
have
things
to
you're saying,
say, so
Hassan.
you're wrong. It's Hassan's way or the highway.
I mean, you
Wow,
are.
really
There is no
clever
both
you
sides
are.
on a genocide. Is there a
Really
both sides of a
clever.
genocide? There is no both sides.
Well, the thing is, it's interesting you should mention the hostages.
There
What
is
is
no
in the
both
Hamas
sides
charter?
and
They want
apartheid.
a Jewish genocide, but that's okay. But a
the
Jewish
thing is,
genocide is okay.
if you're talking about the well-being of the if you're talking about the well-being of the hostages, what sense did it make for the IDF to flatten about 70% of Gaza? Because I completely agree. Bring the hostages home. If you look at Gaza, the topography of Gaza right now, it looks like a pancake. So I'm sorry, this whole argument of Hamas using them as human tools, fine, but the IDF has also been using it to continue that campaign. If you were told that, if God forbid, if your relative was one of the hostages and you saw what's happening right now, and I met someone whose mother is a hostage, and he said he didn't want his mother and her being taken to be used in the name of violence. Right now, he's sitting at home wondering, okay, what is the logic of trying to bring my mother home when you flattened Gaza? Please explain that to us.
That is probably one of the most based statements from this episode. And I think that's the first time I heard someone mention that in media, actually, because let's all continue to say that. If they care so much about the hostages, what was the point of flattening Gaza? Because let's think about this. And I said the same thing in reference to the food. When Israel was blocking the humanitarian aid from coming into Gaza, they weren't just blocking food for the Palestinians. They were also blocking food and aid for the hostages. Whoops. But that shows you that once again, they didn't really care about those hostages, which I said from day one. Did they care about the 3 hostages that they shot point blank that were waving white flags? 3 hostages. White flags. Surrendering. And they killed them. They don't care about those hostages. They didn't care about these people. If they cared that much about the hostages, they would have done everything that they could to get them back. And that's not what has been happening. We'll finish up here with Zio.
So can I pose a question?
You might very well pull those hostages from under.
Okay, let Emily respond to that.
Everyone wants to criticize the IDF's response, but nobody wants to tell me what should Israel be doing to retaliate October 7th, eradicate Hamas from preventing another October 7th, and bring the hostages home.
I have an idea.
Do you have a solution?
I have an idea. Do not flatten Gaza and potentially pull your own hostages up from under the rubble, like have been done with thousands of Palestinians. That's a good idea. Yeah. Have you found any of them under the rubble? So you're saying that you don't have an answer. That is the answer. So you don't kill your own hostages. But you're quick to condemn the IDF, but you don't have an answer.
How about not killing the hostages? So that was, we're not going to finish the whole thing, but if you want to watch this all on your own, have at it. But that was a really interesting point there. Don't flatten Gaza because obviously that hurts the hostages as well. But Emily's making the same like Zionist talking points. They all say the same thing. Their mask is off. You have been exposed. And many of us talked about this years ago. But I think that now, considering after October 7th, it's more talked about. It's talked about more now. People are starting to see just how much Zionism has corrupted that region and just how much, and not just that region, also the United States and the politicians and AIPAC and the Israeli lobby, all of it mixed in together. People are starting to see how dangerous this ideology has become, that you have this supremacist ideology, that only you have this right to have this state that's just for your people. And anybody else that's present there, you have the right to take their homes, to kick them off the land. You know how dangerous this has become. And so the Zionists have nothing else better to do than to continue to tell lies on top of lies. So they've created a mountain of lies. I don't know how Hassan actually made it through that segment. I watched the entire thing and I was like, this is tough. This is tough to watch. But interesting discussion there. Israel has been exposed, man. Definitely exposed. I'll take that comment on Rumble, Eric, the Rumble rant. Thank you so much for that. All right. Thank you for the Rumble rant, Goo. The Irgun and Stern gang, who were the terrorist groups that targeted British and Arabs, eventually became the IDF. Well, damn. Thank you for this as well. Zion Barbie needs to go easy on the Botox and needs skin cream for that oily face. Damn, Goo. IDF got hit by Hezbollah after they occupied a Palestinian Israeli community center because they did not think Hezbollah would hit them as they stationed amongst Palestinian Israeli shields. Interesting. Thank you so much. We'll go to some of the comments here as well. Mr. 13 says, Sabby Sabs, you rock. Oh, thank you and welcome. Shout out to Tia Wheeler says, Zionist Barbie. I know, right? Imagine if that was a cast of The Real World. Remember MTV, The Real World? Imagine if all those people lived in one house. Pick 7 strangers. We'll say 5. 5 strangers to live in a house where things get totally unreal. Thank you, Dwayne. Hassan should have told Kabbalah Karen to lay off the lipogen. You guys are bad. The lipogen, Botox, and peroxide cocktail so she can think straight. Damn. And thank you, Norma Joe. I loved when 2 content creators I respect and follow cover each other's work. It's like a 12-inch remastered remix. Thank you for your work, Miss Sabrina. Thank you and welcome. All right, guys, it's about that time. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash the like button. Thank you very much. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Based. And thank you for this goo. What else should the IDF do this? Fight Hamas man to man, but they can't win man to man. That's a good point. We're moving on to our next story here. You know, Shannon Sharp has this podcast on YouTube called Club Shay Shay, where he actually had a very infamous interview with Cat Williams that went really viral. But he's interviewed a lot of people. Recently, he interviewed Amanda Seales, and I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with her, but Amanda Seales, she's a comedian, actress. Many of you may know her from the show Insecure. I really like that show, right? But Amanda Seales, to some, has been a controversial figure. Some people like her, some people don't like her, but she has criticized the Hollywood entertainment industry quite a bit. And you know what happens when you're pretty vocal about that. I want to talk about the part of this interview where she criticized the media. And she's going after big names here. Print journalism. And then she's also going to talk about Candace Owens and where she's supposed to go in reference to media. So let's get into Amanda Seales' criticism of the media. Listen to this.
Do you feel now that everybody just nitpicks? They just find like, okay, Amanda got on red today. Why she wearing red?
What you think?
I mean, don't
it sound like that?
Is that how you feel?
Absolutely. They are always looking for something. Even these hack writers who were probably paid by AIPAC, they wrote articles based on tweets.
So let's go ahead and chime in here. So notice what she said. So she's saying that the people who wrote articles criticizing her, she believes they're probably paid by AIPAC. Now, Amanda Seales is, very pro like Palestinian. She's not on the side of Israel, just FYI, which a lot of people in Hollywood are. Just keeping it real. Hasn't been that many celebrities come out and support Palestine. I'll tell you that much. But she believes that some of the outlets that have criticized her are basically taking orders from the Israeli lobby. Is that true? Do you think that's true? If you think that's true, enter 1 in the chat. If you think that's false, enter 2. Just curious to see.
Tweets! They wrote articles based on not only my tweets, but on other people's tweets. Like this random person said Amanda needs to change her energy. Black Enterprise wrote an entire article that said Amanda Seales complains that she's not invited into Black spaces. Mind you, these are all spaces that I have worked in. And the follow-up line was, but the internet, so they anthropomorphized the entire internet. The internet says Amanda needs to change her energy. I do not need to change my energy.
Okay, let's come in here. I can already see some of the comments in the chat. Some of you are saying 1. So 1, if you believe is true. DeSell says, okay. BJ, FM, okay. Lawrence says, you guys believe it's true that they were probably taking orders from Zionists. Ashura also believes that's true. Italio said she's got nothing else to fall back on. Some of these comments are really interesting. There was another one, I lost it. Someone said that she attacks. Emmanuel said Amanda loves to hear herself talk. I've heard that from people as well. I can't find it. I'll come back to it. Someone said something like she attacks men or something like that. I was going to pull that up, but I lost it. Gosh darn it. Oh, well. But I see a lot of you are saying one. Someone said 3. I guess 3 is I don't know. Interesting. Okay, let's continue on.
I don't. And all of those spaces, aside from Black Girls Rock, have contacted me. I don't need to change my energy. What needs to change is how we look at energy and how we understand energies that aren't necessarily our own.
Right.
So even as we sat here and we have talked, I have had to understand your energy, and you have asked me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it may not be my own, we live in this space together. We live on this earth together. So we have to gain certain abilities to do that. And that requires a lesser ego. That requires curiosity, which I consider to be an indicative of love. It requires humanity. Like, we live in a world that is continuously creating borders to keep people out because we feel like they don't deserve to be here, because they're different, or because they love a different kind of person, or they believe in something different, etc. And I am not that kind of person. I've never been that kind of person. And it is so liberating for me to understand that the reasons that people have been telling me. So you're talking about the nitpicking. It's not just nitpicking. They assign something to what they're nitpicking. Mm-hmm. Amanda has a tone because she's mean. Amanda said this because she thinks she's better than other Black people. Amanda said what she said because she's nasty. None of these things are true. Mm-hmm. But it feels.
Let's chime in here for just a second. So one of the things I have noticed, and I think this is where some of the criticism may come in about Amanda, is that sometimes when she's talking about how she's treated, whether it's in the media or the industry, it almost kind of comes across as though it's only happening to her, right? And there have been a number of people that have had these issues within Hollywood, entertainment, etc. And that's what it kind of feels like sometimes, that it's only happening to her, not happening to other people. Eric said he found that chat where, thank you. Michael said Amanda Seales is a misandrous. She hates men, especially, that's what it was. I think someone else said that too. She hates men, especially Black men. She lied on Rhodes Scholar, neurosurgeon, and former NFL player Myron Rolle. Okay. Dawn said she attacks Black men. Yeah, I'm seeing this from several people in the chat. Emmanuel said she needs therapy. Okay.
It's terrible for people to assign things to you that are not true. And you start to think to yourself, if this is what it's like for me to be myself, then maybe I shouldn't be here. And as somebody who has had a full-on nervous breakdown and been suicidal, it is not to be taken lightly when people attack character without legitimate reasons why, credibility, etc. And I was told that one of these publications, it was told to them, this is the type of thing that can drive someone to take their own life. And they said, don't go there. This is not a game. This whole last month has been such a journey of self by fire, right? Like, I was forced to have this journey of self by fire simply because I wanted to be embraced in spaces that I embrace. Like, there's no scandal. Mm-hmm. I was supposed to go to Howard to do an event, and I was told that Howard rescinded my invitation because of these stories.
Okay, but see, this is the point I want to make. These things aren't just happening to her. It was a couple, I think it was like a month or two ago. The last time Dr. West was on this show, he mentioned that he was supposed to go give a speech at a church in Chicago, Illinois, a church that I guess he was pretty familiar with. He knew, the pastors at the church and everything, but they had to cancel it because the DNC in Chicago, in that area, apparently made it very clear that they didn't want the church giving a platform to anybody that could hurt Joe Biden's chances in the Democratic Party. And I think sometimes when Amanda tells these stories, it almost kind of comes across as if it's only happening to her. And I think that's kind of the pet peeve that I have, is like, it's not just happening to you. It's happening to other people that have been canceled, other Black people that have been canceled in Black spaces, other people that have been canceled everywhere. Everywhere. There are some people that can't even get onto Shannon Sharp's show, probably. So it's not just happening to her.
These stories that have no validity to them and that I have not, been a catalyst to, but they are now, they're proving to be deleterious to like my advancement. Oh, Amanda Seales, she was attacking Samaria Rice. What? I asked a valid question that ended up being proven, by the way. I asked a valid question. Don't we think that there's something worth questioning, and why this woman whose son was 100% unjustly killed by the police? Don't we think that there's something to be said for, like, why are all these media outlets like giving her a platform to accuse all of these people that are the leaders of movements for fraud? And, my problem is also that I think that people understand what I'm saying when I say something. And like when I wrote my first book, my uncle, who's a judge in Grenada, he was like, make sure you edit that book like a deposition because it's on paper and people cannot read your mind. So say it how you want it to be understood. Yep. Which is difficult in 140 characters.
It is.
But what I was saying with that statement was, why are all of these Black media outlets giving a platform without any level of journalism behind it? That is dangerous.
Right.
And
well, it's not all of them. That's the thing. It's not every Black media outlet. It's not every media outlet, period. I think we got to be careful about saying it that way, so people think that all of them are doing that. That's not true. Mainstream media has been doing that for years.
They're putting these people, mind you, I don't even Sean King, but again, what am I about? Justice. Right. This is Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. Mm-hmm. This is unjustified. He was asked by her brother to raise money. When he got the money and found out that she didn't know, she was given the money. These types of turning this space into a gossip space is dangerous, Shannon. We're trying to make movements and change.
But you do realize that's how social media works. I don't have to be qualified. I could be a doctor.
But I'm not talking about I'm not talking about social media. This is Black Voices and Brio and The Root, etc. Right. They were just running with this story because that's how journalism works now. It's just clicks. Mm-hmm. So in their minds, it seems like, well, if we put this story out, we're going to get the clicks. Mm-hmm. And then there are going to be follow-ups and we'll get clicks for that. Right. And then there's going to be follow-ups. So let's not tell the whole story now. Right. Let's string this along like a soap opera. Yeah. It's people's lives. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we're going to go to the next clip. So I'm just going to go ahead and say this about the clicks that she was talking about. When I studied broadcast journalism, even when I was an undergrad, they always told us that you're supposed to go with sensational headlines. You're supposed to pick a headline that is going to make people actually want to read it. Now, things were different back then. We didn't have Twitter. Okay, so things were a little bit different, but that has always been the case as long as I can remember, that you're supposed to have a headline that's going to grab people. Now, what I will agree with her on is when she talks about the fact of how social media has infiltrated the journalism space. And yes, it is different now. Yes, you do see articles where journalists are commenting, giving their opinion about a tweet that someone has made. Yes, you do see that now because Twitter is such a huge platform. Twitter X, whatever we're calling it. It's so huge and it does exist and a lot of people are on it. That's just the reality of the situation. So things are different in the journalism space now compared to how it was before social media. But as long as I can remember, we were always told to start with a sensationalized headline. Always told that before social media. Now she gets to this point here about Candace Owens and where she's supposed to go in reference to media space now that she has been fired from the Daily Wire.
Can you help me understand this?
I wasn't ready for that.
Sometimes, and it's happened before, people in our community forget that they're Black. and they try to appease a group of people that's probably never going to embrace them. And once they realize that, guess who's the first group to take them back?
I don't know her.
You know, I ain't say nobody's name, Amanda. You don't even know who I'm talking about.
I don't know.
How you know who I'm talking about? But we've seen this happen before. Rest his soul, O.J. Simpson. You know, he had the famous quote, "I'm O.J., I ain't black." Even Michael Jackson went through what he went through, rest his soul.
Right.
Even Kanye had to be reminded. And now Miss Owens, I don't want no black pilots, I don't want this, I don't want that. And now we can't keep off our black media stations. When before she gave us her butt to kiss. Now, if I'm lying, if I'm speaking out of turn, people, y'all correct me. But y'all know I'm telling the truth. Now, you're talking about somebody that's always uplifted this community. And I was one of the first guys that had a viral moment with Cat Williams, and they couldn't wait.
Feliciano is saying, Shannon, you that person? FM said Shannon talking about himself. What are you guys getting at there? What are you getting at there in the chat? Oh, man, guys.
Dude, they couldn't wait to attack me. But Candace has given y'all her butt to kiss for 2 decades. In the moment, what they doing? They can't fire me. They can't fire me. The hell you say? Now look at her.
It's not her fault.
Whose fault is it? Oh, no. Let's not take that blame.
Let her back in.
Huh?
The spaces that let her back in.
Oh, okay. But that's how we are. We're very forgiving people.
Who taught us to
pause here? Notice how if you hover over it, it shows you the upcoming video for this is Candace Owens on Black America, the Breakfast Club, because that's what they're talking about, right? So Amanda is saying that it's actually not Candace Owens' fault that Black media was willing to let her come in. And obviously, I think a lot of you saw the interview that she had with the Breakfast Club. There was a lot of people upset with the Breakfast Club because they didn't give Candace pushback, right? And they've been doing this for quite a while. Not just with Candace. They didn't give pushback to Nikki Haley. Any of the politicians that come onto the show, they don't give them any real pushback. But considering that it was Candace Owens, a lot of people were upset because they said all the things that you had criticized Candace Owens about before in the past, whether it was the George Floyd protest, whether it was the George Floyd documentary that she made, etc., whether it was the comments that she made about the Black community. The Breakfast Club had criticism about those statements. But what people were angered by is that you now finally have her in front of you on the podcast, and you didn't bring up any of that. It was almost like they were trying to be her friends, right? So a lot of people were upset by that. But the point that Amanda is making is that you can't really get mad at Candace Owens for going into those spaces because the spaces let her in. Listen to what else she says here.
Be that.
We do.
Who taught us that version of forgiveness? Do I need to do the lesson?
No, because I know.
Them slave owners taught us that version of forgiveness. They gave us a Bible called the Slave Bible. And this Bible had parts of it taken out. It had the parts of uprisings taken out. It taught about forgiveness because they needed to make it okay in their minds.
No matter how bad I treat you, at some point in time, I need you to forgive me for the wrongs I've done against you.
Because they had convinced themselves that it was still okay to keep people enslaved whose souls were saved.
Yeah.
Even though they knew that was counterproductive to the teachings that they had learned. So, we are oftentimes forgiving to our own detriment.
We are.
And listen, here's the thing. You know what the thing about forgiveness is that you should absolutely forgive people who ask for it.
Right.
Who ask for it.
And I'm okay with that. I'm okay to forgive.
Redemption, baby.
I don't forget. I just move on.
But redemption requires action.
Mm-hmm.
There are restorative justice practices that have to be implemented in order for atonement to truly take place.
Okay, and that's the part there I wanted you to hear as well. Basically, what she's saying, without mentioning Candace's name, basically what she is saying is that in order for Candace Owens to be welcomed into those spaces, Amanda is saying that Candace should have made apology for some of the things that she has said. That's the atonement that she's talking about, going into that there, before she was welcomed into those spaces. And it's interesting. It is interesting. The interview is rather longer than this. These are just 2 clips because he clips up his interviews as well. Watch the full interview. But this is really interesting. Amanda Seales, again, she's one of those people, I think some people either love her or they hate her. I think it might be a little bit extreme on both sides. Like, honestly, there are areas with her where I do agree with her, but there are areas where I don't agree with her on some things, right? I've heard some of the statements that she has made before that I disagree with. But I think that her going on to Shannon Sharp's show, maybe that will open more doors for her that may have been closed. But I got to end with this on this story. Because at the end of the day, you can walk through the doors that are open for you, or you can try to knock the door down. Sometimes when you try to knock the door down, you're still kicked out, right? And kicked out more harshly, blackballed, can't get into other spaces after that. And sometimes you have to build your own. And that's the part that's not easy to do. Because what I would say to Amanda is I would sincerely hope you're not waiting for those spaces to welcome you back in. I hope you're not waiting for the griot to write a kind article about you. Because I would just keep it moving and build my own thing. That's what I would do. That's just me. Because the reality is there are going to be people like that, particularly in entertainment. There are going to be many people like that. There are a lot of people that have been blackballed and blacklisted. We've talked about it before on this show. And I think at the end of the day, sometimes I think, and this is not to say you can't complain about doors being closed in your face, but sometimes you got to build your own. Think about some of the doors that were closed that were actually slammed shut in Ice Cube's face, and he decided to go build his own. That's a good example to point to. Notori says, I feel like they hate her because she is smart and she doesn't tap dance for these hoes. Notori also says, lies. That was a narrative that they put on her. She does not hate Black men. We can talk about it on Zoom call-in after the show. Red said she also lied about being autistic. Really? Interesting. Thank you for the super chat, Nina. October 7th uprisings, killings lasted 6 to 8 hours. And since October 7th, genocide has so far lasted 4,800 hours, 200 days. So everyone needs to shut the F up about October 7th. Sonder Day says she called Jesse Smollett noble. I remember that. I do remember hearing about that. Ugh. Thank you, Buckeyed fan. IDFW Amanda Seales after she tried to pull a fake Me Too story on Myron Rolle. Unforgivable. We could talk about it on Zoom call-in. Wary says, I would say there's a difference between tabloid style headlines and more rigorous ones. That's a good point. John says that just because most articles are done, that's because most articles are done through AI. It's a good point as well. McConan says, Sabs, I would try to get a collab with Amanda or look into what she's been doing before making any sort of critique. The speculation is not productive. I've looked into some of these things. I have no problem talking to Amanda, but I've looked into some of these things and I've reached out to Amanda for a discussion. Thank you, Nas M, for the super chat. There is no Israel, only occupied Palestine. We all need to use the same terminology. Good point, Nas. And thank you, New York Varsity Sports. Shannon is not here to bring you the news. He has a conversation. If journalists did a better job reporting the news and not trying to be the news, there would be a better trust system. Ooh, that is a good point. And thank you, Kime. Can we get Cynthia McKinney interview, please? I am trying to work on that. I think Cynthia was traveling last time I reached out, so I'm trying to work on that. She has been on here before. Based. I think there's a comment on Rumble. I'll take that, and then we'll end with some good news from the FTC. Thank you for the Rumble rant, Goo. I made this comment on Hardlands Media, but I thought to mention this after watching You with JB. I thought of a new Netflix program. I call it Hey, 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 It's Fat Saga. Oh, no. Oh, no, 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 no. No, 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 no. And thank you for this as well. Does Amanda know a somewhat famous comedian named Cat Williams regarding being blacklisted? Yeah, really good point there. Thank you so much for that. And I don't know if Eric's going to get that fixed. We're going to move into our final story here, which is a good news story. And I think this could apply to some of you. So let's end on a good note. If you are not aware, the FTC actually just banned non-compete clauses. This is huge for workers. It was actually an FTC worker who came about this. Now there are some challenges that are trying to be pushed against this, but let's talk about the good news first and how this is going to help workers going forward.
Today, you made a major announcement that helps millions of workers in America. Tell us what that is.
Today, the FTC has finalized a rule that will eliminate the vast majority of non-compete clauses in people's contracts. A non-compete clause is a provision that basically prevents people from taking a job with a competitor or starting a competing business, usually within a particular geographic area and for a certain period of time. So around 30 million American workers are covered by a non-compete.
The incredible number of non-compete clauses for ordinary people to keep wages low.
And so we're talking about fast food workers, security guards, nurses. We're talking about engineers, journalists, veterinarians. These are really people across sectors, across income levels.
So I could not work in my field for 1 full year within that radius.
So let me explain how this hurts workers, because let's just say that you are a security officer. That was one of the professions that they listed. Let's just say you are a security officer, and let's say you want to make more money, and there is another company that is also hiring security officers, but they pay more per hour. Let's say you're hourly. If you are part of non-compete clause, and there are companies that have this, if that is a rival to the company that you work with, you can't apply for a job and go work with that other company that's actually paying more money. It's really messed up when you think about it. Are we really the land of the free? Are we really land of the free? You should be able to go and apply for whatever company you want to, go work for whoever you want to. It shouldn't matter if it's a rival or not. But here we are. So good on the FTC.
And I hope nobody has to go through what I went through, because it was very, very emotional and very challenging.
We heard from workers who were working at a casino, got a better offer at a competing casino with higher wages, but because of the non-compete, they were locked in place. We heard stories from veterinarians who had to uproot themselves multiple times, switching states, all because a non-compete prevented them from being able to do business in the same state.
When you think of the workers and the impact on their wages and earnings in America, what do you anticipate is going to happen as a result of this non-compete ban?
Wages will go up. The average worker will make $529 more every year, which collectively means that tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars of wages will be going back to workers.
Pause there. Now, why is that significant? Yes, this does put pressure on those companies to increase the wages in order to retain those employees. That's exactly what this does. So that's why this is huge. That is why this is so significant. And for people who are not aware, they mentioned veterinarians. Did you guys know, like Vermont and Maine, these states in New England, they've actually been paying people who are doctors, dentists, veterinarians to move to Vermont and Maine because they have a shortage of those workers there. And a lot of the people who are dentists and doctors in those particular states are coming up on like retirement, and they need people to fill those positions. So they've actually been paying people to move there to do those professions. I know a friend of mine, former coworker of mine, actually, her husband was one of those people that moved to Maine because of that, because he was given that offer. And it's not like they were passionate about Maine or anything, but it's just because he was given that offer. And, you know, it really makes you think about these things again. Like, if this non-compete clause would have passed before, let's say 4 years ago, if it would have passed like 4 years ago, I wonder if they would have made that move, because then he would have been able to go work for a competitor. It's just something to think about.
Help people understand why that is. So if there's hundreds of billions of dollars increasing in the economy, how did that happen?
That would happen because right now workers are stuck in place because of these non-competes. And so even if they get a better job opportunity with higher wages, with better benefits, they can't actually switch jobs, which is bad for those workers. It's also bad for other workers who won't have the opportunities that are not being created because of these non-competes. So there's just less churn in the economy overall. There's less dynamism, and that means that wages are lower than they should be.
Corporate America, Chamber of Commerce, many of their allies want to fight this in the courtroom.
The Chamber of Commerce told us today that the FTC's rulemaking is unlawful, and they told me today it's already contemplating legal action against it.
What is our best understanding of why what you're doing today is legal and within your authority?
So the FTC Act that Congress passed clearly gives the FTC the authority to issue rules to carry out its obligations. The FTC Act also prohibits what are known as unfair methods of competition. The agency has determined that these non-competes are unfair methods of competition, and so we have the ability to issue a rule to outlaw them.
As chair of the Federal Trade Commission, one of your goals is to obviously see more competition in America. It's fair to say that if workers were given more freedom of movement, that you might also see more businesses sprout up?
Absolutely. A lot of the comments that we got were from workers that actually wanted to go start their own competing business. We heard from people in the asphalt business that saw an opportunity in the market, wanted to go start a rival firm, but weren't able to do so because they were locked in with a non-compete.
And there's actually...
And let me just pause here for a second. Thank you so much for this, Clifford. The practice of offering doctors money to move to rural communities have been done for some time. Yeah, I mean, it's they were doing this for teachers at one point. I don't know if they still do that now, but at one point they were trying to get teachers to move to like rural areas and offering to pay them a little bit more. But I don't know if they still continue that anymore. But I think that this is pretty based. Now, as you heard, they're already meeting challenges. We're going to finish up here, and I'm going to show you what the Chamber of Commerce is trying to do now that this has been passed.
Correct me if I'm wrong, there's attorneys and bankers who make a decent income who are also affected by non-compete agreements, right?
That's right. I mean, we got comments from across the income level. People making near minimum wage, but also people making tens of thousands of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, sharing stories about how non-competes had been devastating for their lives. We heard from doctors in rural America who shared how non-competes really limit their ability to continue providing care for their patients if they ever look to change employers. So this is having real world effects, harming Americans and harming their communities.
As you were talking, I was thinking of corporate M&A attorneys and big bankers at firms who work on mergers. And I would just want to make a point to them that Lena Khan's got your back. So you'll have more freedom of movement as a result of this non-compete ban.
Okay, so one thing I want to add as well, you know, again, I think you should be able to work for whatever company you want. I don't think there should have ever been this whole non-compete rule anyway. And then there are non-compete rules that are not necessarily written, you know, like they're not written on paper, but it's frowned upon, right? So like when I worked at MIT, depending on what department you were working for, it was kind of frowned upon if like you left that department at MIT and went to work in that same department at Harvard University. Because Harvard and MIT, particularly in the sciences, they are competitors here. So for those of us that worked in like physics and engineering in the science fields, those those fields, when you look at Harvard and MIT, they are competitors here. So that was kind of frowned upon. And it was, again, it wasn't written that you can't do that, but it was kind of frowned upon. It was just kind of like, oh, you left here to go work for Harvard, you know, that kind of thing. But the other thing that I wanted to mention too, in reference to the workers, I want to make sure I bring this up as well, reference to the FTC. So we've had some worker wins yesterday and today, which is really cool. Like I told you, there were going to be challenges to this, right? Business groups sued to stop the FTC from banning non-compete clauses. And it just goes on to say here, we're not going to read the entire thing, but it says the U.S. Chamber of Commerce fulfilled its promise to sue the FTC over a ban on agreements that prevent workers from leaving a company for a rival, arguing in a lawsuit filed Wednesday that the agency overstepped its authority. Really? Like, wow. The lawsuit filed in a U.S. district court in Texas argued that the FTC did not have authority to issue rules that define unlawful methods of competition. The Chamber of Commerce was joined by 3 other business groups, the Business Roundtable, the Texas Association of Business, and the Longview Chamber of Commerce. The suit came a day after the FTC announced a final rule to ban the non-compete agreements. The rule was approved in a 3-2 vote, with both Republican commissioners voting against the measure. The Chamber of Commerce vowed to challenge the rule shortly after the vote. Its lawsuit called the ban a vast overhaul of the national economy and applies to a host of contracts that could not harm competition in any way. It said the agency didn't have the power to issue a ban. Even if it did, a categorical ban on such agreements wasn't lawful. So yes, there are going to be challenges, of course, right? There are going to be challenges towards something like this. But I'm pretty sure, you know, I think the FTC planned for this. They knew that this was going to be a possibility, that there would be lawsuits coming their way. And all I can say is like, we should not have restrictions on workers, period. And I want us to envision a society where we don't have restrictions on workers. Who are they to tell you who you can work for? Like, really think about that, folks, and let that sink in. Who are they to tell you who you can and cannot work for? That should have never happened in this country to begin with. Just something to think about. We are going to do the Zoom call in. I'm going to take just a really quick break. I'll come back, and I believe that link, the Zoom call-in link is already pinned to the top of the chat. Those of you who've been with me, you already know how to do this, but we'll explain when we get back. And then, so Eric's going to jump on for just a second, and I'm right back.
All right. So this is the part of the show where yours truly, Eric T. Raddick, jump in here and give Sabrina a little bit of a break before we jump over to, I guess we can call it the Zoom Hangout, what we used to be doing on Call-In. Call-In, gone but not forgotten, the old Call-In app, but it's dead. They killed it, but that's all right. But the Zoom, doing it on Zoom is interesting. And so will be the link is the posted the pin chat that's up there right now. So you can jump either. I don't know if the room's open or you'll be in the waiting line. Doing it the Zoom way is interesting too. The cameras are optional. You can put a camera on, you can put a camera off. You can put a camera on your cat, as some have been known to do. We may see an appearance by Kiva the cat. I'll have to see if I can find her. But yeah, we have fun over there on Zoom, and you can tell us what you've got to say about all these things, or you can just listen. Let's see. Oh yeah, there was one of the chats we were showing off of Rumble. Got a little bit cut off. Let me finish that one up. Yeah, thanks for this tipped comment on Rumble from a Goo. Yeah, does Amanda Seales know a somewhat famous comedian named Cat Williams regarding being blacklisted? At least he kept it real and called out Diddy, Haddish, and others. Thanks for that and other tipped comments. Goo81, appreciate that. We also had some interesting chats coming through it shows some of those. Ashura said, "Is this Biden doing it to get reelected?" Yeah, definitely. It's they like to throw these things at us and then and get all kinds of credits, saying how much they're doing for us. But it's not nearly enough. I mean, I think you all or in this group probably feel the same. It's not like this is enough to get your vote for Biden. One of the problems, I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, it's something that there should be more. I mean, fine, it's a good thing, and Lena Khan drove it and does good things there at FTC. It's just not nearly enough, and these things also could be very short lived. I mean, this ruling on the non-competes could easily be overturned by an act of Congress, at any time. And, the Republican Congress would probably do it. I wouldn't put it past a Democratic Congress to do it. I mean, it's, they'll come up with some excuse. So it's one of those things, give them the tiny bit of credit. So it said, Jimmy John's can't keep you from making sandwiches elsewhere or sharing KFC's secret herbs and spices. Yeah, but they'll try, they'll try. I've heard even some places, like small companies, even some of the fast food places will do these non-competes just to try to lock you in. It is ridiculous. Amanda Brinkley said this was a good comment. Capitalism has us on the edge all the time and fighting with each other. And I just think that the drama about Amanda Seales is a reflection of sexism and frustration with society. Yeah, I mean, in a way, we do have a very ill society. Capitalism is, a big, a core part of that. And, the way I like to frame it is we can do better than capitalism. It doesn't have to be this way, but we can have a better world or we can have billionaires. So it's time to choose. Wired TARDIS said non-compete clauses have caused professional wrestlers from being able to push for better conditions and contracts for decades. Yeah, I mean, it's about corporate power, right? And we don't need that one. But anyways, yeah, she's married. So let's see. Yes, we'll be jumping over into the Zoom Hangout, formerly known as Call-In, before too long. I think the other thing with the non-compete clause is that a real way to deal with this would be to have a full-up federal jobs program, and this is what some of the MMT people talk about when they talk about how do you really utilize the power of understanding how government and money really works. If you have a guaranteed jobs program, run with federal money, then that changes the work landscape just completely. And it puts a lot of power into the hands of the workers, because they can say, if the job that the private sector is giving me isn't great, well, there's a decently well-paid job in the federal jobs program, and it would be transformative. And so if you want to get real about these things, I mean, that's one way that that would be like a real transformative change. Like I had to laugh. The Chamber of Commerce was acting like this is a transformative, this overhauling the way corporations do business. Well, no, the non-compete stuff is good, but it's not an overhaul. Federal jobs program would be an overhaul. Thanks for the super chat from Super Seamster Sewing Show. Thanks, Sab. You're always the truth, Bakersfield. And thank you, Super Seamster. Appreciate that. And so we had a great interview with Scott Ritter. We can talk about that in the Zoom Hangout, formerly known as Call-In. And I agree with most everything that Scott Ritter had to say. The one thing I would put in there is to always be connecting these things back to the money, right? Every bomb that's dropped in Gaza is profit for the military-industrial complex. Every weapon system that's sold, no questions asked for the Ukraine effort, is money to Raytheon, Lockheed Martin. And that's what's at the base of all this stuff. And so I would urge everyone to never forget that. And also always have demands, right? Connect that. Then what's our demand? Our demand is stop giving all this money to the military-industrial complex and the billionaires, and stop letting them corrupt and bribe our government and use it against us. Have demands.
That's
All
right.
What do you got?
Good point. All right, I've already opened the Zoom room, so if you guys, if you look at the live chat and you actually click on the link on the live chat, and it may ask you to enter a passcode. The passcode is up here, 318249. You can enter that and you can join the Zoom. It looks like a couple people are already in here. So yeah, that's all you need. And you should be able to hop right on. If you want to speak the way that we do this on Zoom, if you actually click at the bottom of the screen, you will see the mute option, start video, participants. You'll see the chat where you can chat with people in the chat, and then you'll see reactions. If you click on reactions, you'll see an option to raise your hand. So if you want to speak, just raise your hand and then we'll go like in that order. But we're going to go ahead and log off here. I'll be live again Sunday evening. Other than that, guys, we are going to head on out. So you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.